Dave Collum. I have not chatted with you since I was up in the cabin where you're at today. I haven't spoken to you since.
Right. It's been busy. It's been hectic around my house, and so I've been kind of holding up. People have asked me if I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine. And people think that somehow it's hiding because of my Tucker interview or whatever. No, it's just I'm so up to my ass and things that I'm kind of not emotionally ready to wrestle with. So in any case.
Yeah, I first of all, let me say I want to say this on here. Thank you so much for hosting me on my trip, on my 5.5 week adventure, and one of those stops was coming to visit you, and I appreciate the fact that you took me in, you fed me, provided me shelter, and
shared a room.
shared a room. We did share a room.
Yeah, that's right. It was that's as intimate as you can get without getting kinky.
In yoga, they used to do this bros and pose workshop that you could sign up for. It was kind of like that, what we were doing.
Right. Well, we all had roommates at one time or another, so it doesn't strike me as a big deal.
It was amazing that, I had so many takeaways from my trip, but my time up with you was, first of all, you have no concept of time when you're in the woods like that.
None.
I couldn't believe it.
We forget what day it is. We don't know what time it is. We don't.
I mean, I was getting ready to leave your cabin up at 10. It was 10 in the morning, and it felt like 5:30 in the morning.
Right. The other thing you can have is where a cloud goes overhead and you think it's gotten dark because you saw the trees, right? I mean, if you look outside, the diameter of some of the trees around the house are 2-3 feet, and so we really are deeply embedded in the woods. So a cloud goes overhead, you can think the sunset. And then all of a sudden it lightens up again. You go, oh, it's like an eclipse. So.
And the fact that there's no cell service. I mean, you and I went into town a couple of times, and I don't know if I told you this.
Well, we have cell service as long as our router's working. But so we have Wi-Fi based cell, but you got to hook up to it.
But like driving around the town. So after you and I had breakfast, I didn't realize because I had plugged because I went from hanging out with you to go see Jim Kunstler. And I had
didn't have GPS.
Well, the GPS, as soon as I unplugged the phone, the directions were gone. So I had to go back into the restaurant, get on the Wi-Fi, and reprogram them in. So
and the restaurant turns out to be in a complete dead zone. So their Wi-Fi is their only hope. So you get no cell signal at this restaurant.
And even for a while, though, en route to Saratoga, it was a while before a signal came back.
Well, interesting. I think it's Google Maps. It's not MapQuest. I think it's Google Maps that once you put it in, it remembers it.
It does until you unplug your phone from the
car.
That's
the mistake. Yeah. That's the mistake. Yeah.
So, I think about that, and I'm like, man. And I grew up. I guess I'm part of the last generation that didn't have cell phones or any of that. And man, if the towers ever went out and people's phones didn't work, this country, we would lose our shit.
Well, I have colleagues who say, how did you find anything without GPS? They can't fathom. My younger colleagues can't fathom how you'd say, for example, drive to New York City, how you'd know where to go. I go, well, you plan ahead. Let's start with that. And AAA used to do a triptych where you could actually ask them to tell you how to go there.
And they'd stamp it for you. They'd give you the actual map and they'd mark it for you.
Yeah.
This country would tear itself apart if the phones didn't work.
It certainly would cause problems.
The only good thing is, though, if that were to ever happen, not that anything good would come from it, but you wouldn't be able to organize on a mass scale either.
Right. There's a book about a EMP, and where all of a sudden all the cars in the road just stop and no one knows why, and everyone gets out of their car, and then it sort of follows what would happen. It goes through it's kind of an Annie Jacobson flavored, what would happen next, and the guy's daughter ends up dying from because she can't get insulin and things like that. So it talks. I'm a bit of a prepper at heart. I became a bit of a prepper for Y2K, which turned out to be a scam. It wasn't just not true; it was a scam, in my opinion. But it taught me the whole idea of what if the supply chains break down? What do you have to be ready for? So when COVID lockdown appeared, the minute I realized we're probably gonna lock down, I hit the grocery store. I knew everything I had to get. I had already mentally planned, and I think everyone who owns a house should own a couple $100 of rice in the basement and things like that. It's just, there's no excuse not to. It's about, for about $300 or $400, you can make sure you're not going to starve to death, at least for a couple of months.
Well, and it, these things that we're talking about, it's not crazy anymore. Where 7 years ago, anymore. It was, people look at us that we were insane.
They still do that, but for different reasons now. My brother and I were talking about this yesterday, actually. We're almost facing this paradoxical situation where either every narrative we know is fucked up, or we are completely fucked up on every narrative. And it seems as though it's almost binary at this point, where you say, give me a narrative, I'll tell you what's wrong with it, right? And then the question is, did we get duped? He reminded me of John Ziegler when you did a podcast with him, because I hooked you up with him, and you guys had Penn State overlap and stuff. And he convinced himself that Sandusky is innocent, right, for his pedophilia stuff. And he makes a good case, and Malcolm Gladwell made the same case. And then I talked to Nick Bryan, who's an expert on trafficking. He says, oh, no, Sandusky was part of a network. And so then the question is, who's right? Right. It's so binary in some ways. And it seems as though I listened to, I started to listen to a book on the USS Liberty, but there's a better way to study the Liberty, and that is there's a bunch of documentaries. Now, what's great about the documentaries is they interview the guys who were on the USS Liberty. So this is not some ooh-ah narrative where they're narrating, with sketchy footage and weird innuendo. These are guys saying, look, I was laying on the deck. This is what was happening. And there's no question that the Israelis hit the USS Liberty on purpose. There's no question. And then as soon as they finally got a distress call out, and it still got completely fucked up, which said either the U.S. knew it, or the authorities knew it, or they covered it immediately, one of the two. But somehow the Israelis had been watching the Liberty for 2 or 3 days. So they knew exactly what it was. The guys on ship said they could see the pilot. How is it possible that the Israelis tried to sink a ship containing 294 guys, or they like to say, it's an interesting way of putting it, 294 souls. That's a military term, I think, souls. When a plane's going to go down, or they talk about a plane going down, they talk about the number of souls that went down. So it's I find it provocative. And they tried to sink it. They shot the lifeboats. Israeli ships showed up, and they thought they were saved. And all of a sudden, they start shooting torpedoes at the Liberty. And so then the question is, why did the Israelis try to sink the Liberty? I think it was to drag us into a massive war against the Arabs, and they fucked it up. And no one in the position of authorities ever fessed up to it. And so. It's stuff like that. You can only see so many of those before you say, look, I don't know what's going on at all.
Well, and that is one of the stories now where, the Israel story is just not going away. And are you surprised that, two things. One, I don't even know if it's an Overton window anymore, but you are free to discuss it, where 2 years ago you couldn't. This is another topic that was considered radioactive. And
it's now opening up.
It's way open. It's beyond that
and
now.
That's because of guys like Dave Smith and Candace Owens, who are just out there just blowing it at the top of their lungs. And so they can no longer pretend that. So I was agnostic on the Israeli battle. And again, if you want to accuse me of being anti-Semitic because I don't agree with what the Israeli government's doing, then you can fuck yourself. I have zero patience for you. And if you want to say Israel is Jews and Jews are Israel and there's no difference, then you're fucked up. You're completely fucked up. And so when we can't criticize a government, it's not my fault. It's your fault. The figurative you. And so I will criticize. And what stunned me is not that Israel responded strongly, but it's a genocide, in my opinion. It is. I've been quiet on it. I've been hinting at it, but I just can't watch anymore. And I don't want to. I don't want to go to my grave saying I didn't say anything. And so I think Israel's fundamentally wrong here, and in a profound way.
Well, and this is I've said this since the get-go. Well, not initially, but shortly after, I said there's no way that they knew, and I think I probably said this to you. There's no way that they did not know about what was going to happen October 7th.
No chance. No chance.
You get paramotors flying in the air. You don't put that event to get. I mean, I'm not a what's the description? A planned attacks, but you can't do that in a week. I'm gonna assume here. So there's training, also, paramotors
so
flying,
right? That woman, Fenixson, who was Effertson.
Effort Fenixson. This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike.
And she, within a week, she came out with Brett Weinstein and they both said, there's no way this happened without the Israelis knowing it. So this is a classic false flag, which I get. I've given up thinking that any war ever starts legit. I don't think there's been a war in the 20th century that wasn't false flag driven. And you name a war. And some people say, oh, what about the Gulf War? Totally false flag driven. We gave Saddam the nod to go hit Kuwait. What about the Spanish-American War? They sunk the Maine, right? Gulf of Tonkin. You go over Pearl Harbor over and over and over again. They're always false flags. And so Israel's it's false flag, but the ruthlessness of their response is just not acceptable. And I'll take the heat. If you want to come at me for being anti-Semitic, you might lose some teeth, So sticks and stones will break my bone. It's not against the law for you to call me an anti-Semite. It might be libelous, but it is against the law if I smash your face in, and therefore that would make me think twice. But I don't want it anymore. I'm not taking your shit.
Well, and to make the argument, the whole. It's a response to the attack and, never again type of mentality. Okay, well, how much is enough? First of all, I can't believe whoever's left there. I can't believe anybody's still alive.
I can't either. It looks like Hiroshima. Now, they say that, they say Hamas is stealing all the good. They say Hamas is stealing all the supplies, but then they say that the Palestinians, the Gazans are Hamas, right? So they say that that's why they're wiping out the place because it is Hamas. I go, well, they're stealing the supplies from themselves then? What, right? And as Dave Smith said really well, he says, you got a terrorist inside an apartment complex. Do you really get the level of the complex? No, you do not. And so I would say the Israelis have totally misbehaved. If I was king of the world, I'd cut them off. I'd say you're on your own now. You've gone one too far. I had a Canadian intelligence guy tell me I had to read Mearsheimer's book to understand the world, and I did, and it was rather appalling. So,
well, the question that I asked Pete Canonesis when he was on the other day. I said
he was very strongly stated.
Very, very strongly. I didn't know we were going to go there like that, and which was great.
He really went there.
Yeah, Pete's great. But I asked him, same thing I'm about to ask you. Do you think that this information is getting out now to create more of a divide with people, or they just can't hide it anymore?
They can't hide it. I think that the mainstream media does not have the cojones to speak up. So you will not. When you have an issue like this, if you can't find a Sunday morning talk show where five smart guys are sitting around the table talking about the pros and cons, then there's something wrong. right? So you find out what narrative you're not allowed to say, and those are the bad guys. So it's lockdowns, it's Ukraine, it's Israel, it's the ones you're not allowed to talk about are the ones that we should be talking about.
So do you think it's both fronts then, that they want to create a further divide within the country, and the fact that they can't hide it anymore? Because this is what I thought. And you and I have talked about this too. I mean, when Trump, I believe the people wanted him in. I'm trying to word this differently so I don't bore my audience, but I believe the people got what they wanted in terms of the election. And I was wrong. The fact that I thought she was going to get installed, I thought Kamala would get installed in because of the way they cheated in 2020. But big tech did. I mean, they pushed him in. They supported him. And
I think he would have won anyway, so I'm not sure you have to go that far. But they certainly all of a sudden thought very bigly. And as you said, there was no evidence of rigging the election, which either it's because it was just not going to be able, you couldn't do it in broad daylight the way we did in 2020, which I think was a profoundly rigged election. But they might have said, look, we just can't do it. We're just going to have to make lemonade out of lemons here.
I don't think that. I don't think that at all. And not to cut you off, but because I think that they didn't allow the other side to cheat because it benefited MAGA. It benefited these people to have Trump in there to usher in this new digital system. And, we'll get to Aaron Day, my conversation with Aaron Day, but I saw Catherine Austin.
Well, so the idea being is you win over MAGA. You get MAGA
take it over.
Supporting the wrong cause.
You take it over.
Yeah.
Not even.
I think that's a reasonable model.
And you look at that now, and that's why I wonder with the Israel tying it all in from that standpoint is, create more divide, get people more hating each other, to ultimately maybe lead to some type of kinetic conflict within the United States. I mean, I could be way off here, but also and then for that, if that occurs, then you can start, not even implementing, but moving forward with the digital instruments to lock this country down.
So for years, I've been saying that the internet is democracy's greatest hope and potentially worst enemy. I have now come to the conclusion we're going to lose. And I've come to the conclusion that the reason we're going to lose is because the internet is so powerful. The digital world is so powerful that whoever controls it will be too powerful. So the only way you could not control it, the only way you could have it not powerful is there was some way to make it truly open source. But then the propaganda experts win, right? And propaganda has now been refining itself very, very quickly to match the digital world. Edward Bernays would be impressed. And so I think we're going to lose. I think we're heading for a very brittle future in which things don't work, in which we're as you mentioned, Aaron Day, he talked about all sorts of things that I hadn't thought about. Trivial things like, not letting people use food stamps to buy junk food, right? And it sounds like a good idea because if we're going to pay to feed some household full of kids and the parenting doesn't work, we should at least feed them, right? Not give them Mountain Dew. But he points out that is a CBDC, that is already a digitally controlled consumption mechanism. And so in some sense, they're desensitizing us to it. I thought Aaron made great points. I thought he was very impressive in what it was the simple things that he pointed out. They're not simple that really caught my attention. So I listened to it twice, actually. I don't do that normally.
The other thing, and I think with him and pairing it up with my conversations with Matt Smith, because Matt Smith was talking about back in February what they were attempting to do, this administration is attempting to do about devaluing the dollar and stable coins, and now we have the Genius Act, and it's like all tied together.
Tell me about the Genius Act. Give me a thumbnail sketch, because it's something that I've got to note to myself, dig into the Genius Act, and I have not had time to do it. Tell me about the Genius Act.
So you're going to put me on the spot here so I sound like a subject matter expert, and I'm going to totally screw this up.
Well, no, just give me an abstract.
Well, so I could be way off here because I've had to go back and listen to conversations with both Aaron and Matt to try to grasp it. And
But no one has said, let me lay out the Genius Act for you. They hit it. They occasionally criticize it, but I've not found a document that says, here are the 20 horrible things of the Genius Act.
well, it's a stable coin, right? And the stable coin is supposed to be
Right.
dollar for like dollar match dollar for stable coin. And I'm probably totally
Right.
butchering this and I'm going to get shit for it. But so from my understanding, the best I can grasp it here, they are moving us into this reserve with a stable coin to where they will be able to somehow inflate the debt away, utilizing Tether. Maybe
Yeah, that's the part I did. I read an article the other day about capturing the nominal gains in gold. That a country can capture the nominal gains in gold. And they talked about the first thing they said made no sense to me. They talked about selling gold and then immediately buying it back. And so now you've changed the cost basis from $42 an ounce to $3,300. And I go, but what are you going to buy it back with? Let's start with that. You're just talking about buying it back, but what are you going to buy it back with? And I think they're going to monetize it, right? So I think it's just flat out inflationary. And then as you read the article, they kept using these euphemisms. I can't even remember, but they talk about these accounts that sound innocuous, which really come down to the fact that they're talking about countries that are buried in debt and they got to sell their gold. I'm going, you could have just said that. You didn't have to beat around that bush. And I read the article very carefully and I realized they're just saying sell your gold. Just sell it. And what that tells me is someone wants your gold. Now, gold's also been converted to a tier 1 asset, supposedly, and so now it could be used to collateralize debt. And the problem with that is that we don't need more debt. We need less debt, right? We don't need more collateral for debt. And Luongo would say, oh, yes, we do. And I go, only because we're in a Ponzi scheme and you're saying that we need to keep it going, right? But at some point, you remember, I think it was with you. It was either with you or Kerrigan. It might have been with Kerrigan, where Tom Luongo, Jim Kunstler, and I, we seem to swap back and forth. We seem to go as a threesome. And Luongo was saying we got to pass the big beautiful bill, period. So Trump can get shit done. I said no, I've had enough now. They're talking about it adding $2 trillion to our debt. He says, well, we'll deal with that later. And I go, they've been saying that for 50 years now. It's time. No. Say no. It's time. And people say, well, we can't afford our debt. And I go, we should have thought about that as we spent money in Ukraine, as we dumped money all over the world, as we built this huge military that shouldn't be out there, right? Now it's time, right? We're a bunch of crack whores.
But they're never going to stop. But they're never going to stop.
They're not.
Never.
But therefore, that's fine, but you got to recognize you're a crack whore now. You say, I'm a crack whore. If you want to say, I'm a crack whore, give me more crack, that's fine. If you think it's a good thing, that's where I'll challenge you.
Catherine Austin Fitz was talking about how, they use Trump, the tech bros use Trump to usher in this, to implement these processes quickly. And now that they've basically completed what they needed done, and this is what Matt Smith was also talking about with Doge.
And he's not needed anymore.
He's not needed anymore. Did you see that clip?
Anymore.
And then saying that they could use the
I
Epstein.
watch Catherine a lot.
They use the Epstein. They could use the Epstein to get rid of him. That he's actually part of it, or that's what she was saying.
Catherine and I go back quite a few years. She reached out to me one day when I had one of my year in reviews, and there was a link that they were looking for from the review, and it wasn't the right link. And the guy I worked for asked for, do you have a link for that? And I could see the email trail. And she says, Dave's pretty good at referencing. Ask him, blah blah blah. But at one point, she wrote a blog. She said, every year I round up a dozen year in reviews and I read them to figure out what people said happened that year. And she said, now I've just taken to the point, I just get a big pot of coffee and I just read Dave's. She just said, I just read Dave's. I've had some epiphanies on my year in review. I've been going over old ones for a reason, not just nostalgia. And things have changed. Things have changed in ways that I didn't would not have noticed if I didn't have to go back and proofread. It turns out Bob Moriarty's hard binding every year in review. It's about 3,000 pages. It's an extraordinary body of drivel. Reading it, I've discovered that over the last 10 years, things have simply fundamentally changed. And it has to do with the flavor of the review and the sense that 10 years ago, you could make statements about something and not be in doubt that it could be total crap. And so once you got information, you felt like you had information. And now you don't believe you ever have information, right? So when I was talking with Tucker, we talked about the signal noise problem. I think Matt Smith used the signal to noise analogy too in one of his podcasts where they can't suppress the signal. The internet's too big, but they can increase the noise. And so we're all wallowing in vast amounts of noise, right? Vast amounts of noise. And
very well worded what you just said. They can't, would you say they can't decrease the signal, but they can increase the noise?
Yeah. Yeah. So they're just making it to the point where guys like me can't wade through it. We just can't get through it. And the clarity of what I was writing about in 15, 15 was an interesting period. It's an interesting period because it's 10 years ago. It's an interesting period because I use it as a benchmark to look at how nuts the stock market has gone in the last 10 years. It's also a period in history where we had gotten through the GFC. And we had, at about that time, fully come to terms with how fucked up it was, how fucked up the response was, and then how the markets got completely and utterly out of control by 2015. Having seemingly corrected, they were then nuts again. And I'm unambiguous case that they were nuts, completely psychotically nuts. I've got quotes from globally famous people saying these markets are heading for another cliff. They're heading for another brick wall. They're heading for another metaphor. And I don't know how we got here. And here are the numbers. And so I lay out the case for why 2015 was fucked up. And if you say what happened since 2015, everything just got more fucked up. Completely and utterly fucked up. And we've reached a point now where as a watcher of markets, they appear to be completely incapable of responding to stimuli. So they just do what they do. And it's not like, one way I describe it is if there's bad news, there's 3 guys left willing to short the markets. When the bad news turns out to subside or it becomes old news, millions of people jump in to buy. And so the asymmetry of the buy-sell crowd is not there. There's no wall of worry left. There's just, people are they're just on this treadmill. And I know to the bottom of my soul, I know, I'm not religious, that this will end badly. What I don't know is when and how. But there have never been markets remotely like this. Remotely, by some metrics, we're historically at all-time overvaluations. When they correct, it's going to be unbelievable.
I have a friend and we talk about all this stuff and, talk about like retirements and pensions. And I said, I don't know what form those things are going to be there in 10 years or 15 years. I go, but they either won't be there or whatever's there is not going to get you much, if anything. And
by the way, did you infer from Aaron's talk? Did you infer that he was saying that the Bitcoin guys are going to get clobbered?
Yeah, so I have a theory on that. Let me share this with you because I haven't shared it with anybody yet. And I am not a Bitcoin person. I don't understand it. I mean, I have Marty Ben on, which I want to actually get him back on because I love talking to him.
I'm supposed to talk to him tomorrow.
Oh, are you? He's great. He's a great host, by the way, too.
He is a great host.
Yeah, I mean, he's somebody I definitely admire. His I hate to say interviewing because I'm not an interviewer, but his skills are second to none. So shout out Marty.
But he also is very fuck you, Marty. He has a deep understanding of Bitcoin, but he also recognizes various downsides, and he recognizes craziness. And I think he deeply, deeply believes that Bitcoin will prevail over the craziness, which is where he and I part ways, because I don't think by any stretch it's a guarantee. But
let me share you my thoughts. Let me share my thoughts with you for a second on this, and tell me what you think. I've heard this. The whole thing with Bitcoin is decentralized, right? Decentralized currency. It's considered currency, right? Decentralized currency.
It's not quite a currency at this point. It's more of an asset class.
Okay, so decentralized asset class. If the government wants to centralize, which appears what they're doing, and maybe this is what ties into the Genius Act.
Right now.
So the story, and I meet young people that are big Bitcoin, right? And I see all these influencers out there doing the tour. Bitcoin is the future. I mean, even Dr. Jack Cruz, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. I heard the story about Napster. Wouldn't have thought about this, but I remember Napster. You remember Napster. And what was the idea behind Napster? That was music sharing. I could share a file with you. I could take my CD, put it into Napster, push a file to you, and now we're sharing music all over the world and stealing. Then it was LimeWire. They took Napster down. I mean, I even remember the MTV Music Awards where the guy came out because Metallica was suing them. Metallica and a couple other big name bands were suing Napster to bring it down. And the guy from Napster comes out to accept an award, and he had a Metallica t-shirt on just to fuck, because Metallica was in the audience, just to fuck with them.
Right.
But then Napster went away. Then you had LimeWire and so on and so forth. So what did they do? They figured out Spotify and Apple Music.
They swallowed it. They basically swallowed Napster.
And figured out a way to centralize it. So, I mean, I have Apple Music. I pay, whatever it is, $11 a month for it. And I love it, by the way.
Right.
And I get access to all these catalogs and whatnot, so forth. So why can't they do that with Bitcoin? And that's what, to me, if the government, they can subsidize or incentivize people like you and I to use to use this asset class, and then maybe they pay us to do it. So then what happens to all these influencers and all the Bitcoin they have? Are they gone? Is it the Napster?
Well, that's the $1 million question. So for me,
did that make sense what I said though?
I think at some point it gets absorbed. You're right. And this is why there's different factions within the Bitcoin community. And one of them are youngsters who don't know shit about history and don't know shit about markets and therefore don't know shit about risk. There are the guys who do understand Bitcoin deeply, but also do understand the market structures and do understand history and do understand, as I've said on many podcasts, I said, look, guys, if the government comes along and says it's against the law for you to own and sell Bitcoin now, you're in a bit of trouble. And they talk about moving to Guatemala, and I go, I'm not willing to move to Guatemala. If you are, then maybe that's your plan, but that's not where I want to be. And the question I have is are these guys going to do really well, and then told, by the way, you've now had your fun, you've got your money, go live the good life, and thank you for debugging the whole thing, and we'll take it from here, right? Or are they going to get buried? And I'm inclined to think that the guys who did well will probably be able to keep their proceeds as sort of a perk for having developed the system for the authorities. But I can't rule out the possibility they're going to say. By the way, I read a synopsis of a meeting on crypto that was an intelligence military meeting. The guy wrote a synopsis, and he described all the events at the meeting and the different talks and stuff like that. And he's a friend, and there was no mention of Bitcoin. They talked about crypto, they talked about blockchain. There was no mention of Bitcoin, no mention of Ethereum. And I can't tell if they were somehow trying to stay off of specific coins, or if they're saying, look, those are not going to be relevant. Those are just retail storefront coins.
So do you think then, is it, I mean, the way I explained it, did that make sense of where tying that analogy?
Yeah.
So do you think
we're going to have Pooch coin?
Which one is that?
This is Fiona.
Oh, Fiona.
We now have a new one. We have a fourth.
Yeah, I knew the fourth was coming.
Yeah, the fourth is adorable.
If the fourth one's walking around, you have to pick him or her up and
Yeah.
show. But so do you think like it'll go by the wayside? The people that have this Bitcoin now, will it go by the wayside of
I
Napster
just don't know.
and it'll become junk? Or do you think it'll absorb into the
I
new
don't know.
system?
Well, what's the status of the guy who started Napster? What's his status right now? Is he wealthy? Is he in prison? Well, I can't remember.
I have no
I know
idea.
at one point prison was in his future, but they might have said, "Look, cooperate with us. You don't have to go this path."
Oh, Sean Parker.
Yeah.
Sean Parker was part of the Facebook evolution.
So the question is he thrived by virtue of Napster, or did they bury him or say, okay, you get to keep what you got, but now you got to go?
I'm just pulling this up right now really quick on AI Overview. He has also invested in Spotify and co-founded other companies like Plaxo
So
and
therefore,
Causes.
he went with the absorption. He went along with it.
Yeah.
And I think that might happen. So I think that, one thing I know is that Max and Stacy and Marty and Saylor are not going to replace the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. So we're not going to flip all currencies and make the guys, whoever has all the goddamn Bitcoin, the global rulers. They're not going to let that happen. And so you have to come up with a path that explains where they go and how they. I think it's just going to be, you're not needed anymore. You're rich. Get over it.
What about the low level though? That's what I wonder. I mean, not low. I
Well,
mean, when I mean by low, I mean I'm talking about like
retail,
the influencers that are out there right now that are selling this at all these conferences all over the world.
They all got to go, right? I mean, they're all going to go.
What do you mean go? Like
Right.
they're going to get buried?
Well,
Not literally, but I mean, they're going to get.
I don't know, but at some point that business model's not going to work when BlackRock is doing it, right? Right. That was, revolutions are fueled by young men mostly, right? Sorry, babes, but they tend to be young men because they tend to be the testosterone coursing through their veins, get them to revolt. And the problem is that a revolution in a financial asset means you also have the greenest investing class in history, right? And so, but like the digital revolution that started with Apple and eventually in Microsoft, these guys were young, right? They were Michael Dell freshman year in his dorm making Dell computers, and they did fine. They got absorbed at some level, but they did fine. All the Titan techs were all within about a 3-year age window. It was really extraordinary. I saw an analysis once, and they were all about the same age. And so,
well, also too, with Bitcoin, if let's say you're sending me some, if you get one number off that passkey, you can lose it it goes into the ether.
See, I'm too ignorant to know about that, and if I've heard you say that, and I find that spooky because how many times have you miscued your password to log into your computer or to log into Amazon or whatever? So,
and that's a simple password. I mean, that could be Jones 23, where a passkey like this, it's what is it, 12 digit, 14 digit with numbers and letters and asterisks.
Well, it's a deflationary event because if there's 21 million Bitcoin and you lose a Bitcoin, there's now less than 21 million.
Well, and the other thing is too, and I say this to Bitcoin people. You should ask Marty this tomorrow. They always have an answer, but it makes no sense. Like I asked a guy who I know personally because he's a huge Bitcoin guy. He's always got a response, but it never makes any sense, at least to me. I said, okay.
Well, that's like the gold repricing guys. The gold repricing community right now is making no sense. And I did a podcast with a well-known guy, and my counterattacks seemed to stun him.
Who was it?
I don't want to mention him because I just insulted him, but I mean, he's a smart guy, and he seemed to be on his heels when I said, well, okay, so how do you reprice the gold, right? Like I just said, how do you capture the capital gains of the gold, a sovereign state? When you actually think about it, you go, you got to sell it. To take all the gold the U.S. owns, sovereign gold, and to call it a new price, that doesn't get you anywhere. That achieves nothing. You got to be willing to part with it. And in fact, Canada parted with every last ounce back in around by 13, 14, 15. That's one of the things I reminded myself of reading my annual reviews. I had more gold than Canada.
Well, so what also happens with Bitcoin too? If you have, you have people holding it that die. I mean, people die every year. Where does all that go?
It disappears.
But to where? That's what I'm not.
Well, that's the
not
deflation.
that you know.
It's like, well, what happens when your house burns down and your antiques burn up, right? Well, now there's less American antiques available in the open market. So it makes it more precious in that sense. The hodlers, they benefit. If all of a sudden Michael Saylor lost all his passkeys, the problem there is it would undermine the entire idea of Bitcoin, but it sure as hell would make the per Bitcoin value higher to the extent that the Bitcoin is trying to reach some total net market cap. Right? If it's like a silicon chip shortage, it supply demand curve. Supply just decreased.
What's funny is I could log in and pay my cell phone bill or my insurance some of these I got to do 4-digit PIN codes to get in. One password right. I don't think I've changed in 20 years is my bank account logins. Isn't that so ironic? Isn't that so ironic?
I know. What drives me nuts though is when you get told that your password's not right and you know it's correct. What they're really saying is we want you to change it, but we're not going to just say we want you to change it. They just say it's not right. Forgot your password ? And so you go change it. I oftentimes put in the original password and then it accepts it. It says, oh, okay, thanks for giving us the new password.
But you would think if anything would prompt you for...
The bank accounts would be more rigorous, you would think.
Never. I don't think I've changed my password for my bank accounts in 20 years. I don't know, 15 years, 20 years.
Right. I'm getting exceedingly tired of the digital. I don't want to have to download an app to buy a Big Mac. That world just I have no interest in it.
No,
none whatsoever. I find it to be a very brittle, fragile world.
I had Paul Craig Roberts on with Gary Haven a couple of weeks ago, and
I listened to him. You ever watch Gary Haven's movie that he made?
No.
He made a movie. It was very right wing. It was really one of these, it was a total grade B movie. It's one of these, patriot, rah, rah, we got to get our guns out. We got to go save those guys. I can't even remember what the plot was, but it was definitely, John Birch Society sort of movie.
Well, and Paul Craig Roberts was saying the digital revolution is the second dumbest idea behind the nuclear weapon. I agree with that.
Well, so here's the challenge with Roberts. And I had a few exchanges years ago with Roberts. He has a great resume, but he is increasingly out of date. And so you would have to convince me that by virtue of his original position in society, which was pretty high up, that he has somehow been able to maintain those connections, because otherwise he's got no advantage over you and me. Right? And so former Undersecretary of the Treasury, right? That was his position, as I recall.
Been in supply side economics. He went to Davos with Kissinger in the 80s.
Well, that's my point, though, right? So your connectivity, your wisdom, it slowly but surely fades if you're not staying connected, right? It's like we've talked about. If you're not paying attention to the news and you'll look up a month from now, let's say take a vacation, you don't listen, you have no idea what's happening. You have no idea. You're totally out of touch.
But the whole idea with the digital revolution and how people are they don't talk. I mean, you're supposed to be phones, but nobody uses them for that.
And the problem is that you can do all sorts of bullshit back and forth when you really should have just picked up the phone and said, hey, let's hack this out. So I can't stand the fact that people aren't willing to just pick up the phone and resolve the issue. But the thing that scares me about the digital world, besides all the, the invasion of privacy, that's already gone. Scott Healy said that was gone back in 99, I think. But I worry about the idea that we will live in a world where human intervention to solve a problem won't even be possible. And I don't mean like the robots are gonna rule us like these glowing-eyed crazies, but rather it's just, if you're at the grocery store and your credit card won't go through, there's nothing they can do. Right? There's no one at the store who can say, let me do an override on this for you. And that's just going to get much, much worse with AI. And by the way, I was writing about AI back around 2013, which I had no idea until I reread it. And yet AI didn't show up until about last year in earnest, right? ChatGPT, boom, came out of nowhere. But the AI has been talked about for years. What was it doing? Was it just simmering in a crock pot somewhere?
I get mixed.
I don't know.
I get mixed reviews on that too. Where some people will say how advanced it is and it's moving so quickly, and it's going to displace so many people. And then I have on the other side of it, I hear like it's bullshit. It's hype. There's a lot of promises, empty promises. It can't deliver. So I'm really I don't know.
Well, see, I don't have the apocalyptic view, except for I view that a brittle world where human interventions are not doable anymore is a somewhat apocalyptic. But I don't see it as like the robots in Terminator.
Yeah. I don't see that either.
Yeah, that model doesn't scare me. It is going to displace people because I have coffee every Saturday morning with a bunch of former Cornell hockey players and stuff who are about my age. And one of them was a former pharmacist, and he said, well, they're always going to need pharmacists. I go, not even close. You're going to scan your prescription. There's going to be a robot in the back, counts out the pills, gives you a prescription. He says, well, what about, clashes with other drugs? I said, you think you're better than a computer? Holy shit, you're not even close. Computer can find drug interaction problems way faster than you can. And maybe you're pretty good because you're a veteran, you've been around a long time, but there's new drugs every day. And the computer can be networked, some blockchain of drug problems. Of course, we know pharma won't let that happen because they don't want those to get out. But so I really do think it's going to displace people. Now, here's the problem. You say, well, yeah, that's always occurred, but the speed. Brett Weinstein said it well. He said, the world is changing too fast to digest it. So if I have kids, for example, they go off to college, what do you tell them to study? What do they study? I would have no idea what to tell a kid to study. It's computer science. Are you sure?
Matt and I were talking about this when I was in Virginia. My friend and I started talking to this guy, and he was explaining to us. He was an electrical engineer. Did I tell you this? And he was working for Amazon Web Services, and he was talking about all these data centers that are being built all over the place. And he's like, "We can't find
huge energy consumer.
We can't find electrical engineers." He's like, "We can't find them."
Well, onshoring all these jobs that Trump's trying to achieve, I get it. I do get that idea. But we don't have anyone here to do the jobs. If we did, they'd be unemployed. I was speaking of stupidity. The other day, Jerome Powell said, the problem is we just haven't built enough houses. That's why housing's so expensive. And I go, so let me see if I got this right. We haven't built enough houses, which therefore means that there's people who would buy houses, but they're living on the street. No, they're living in apartments. And I go, well, then if we build houses, they move there, then we'll have a commercial real estate problem. We are housing everybody. Anyone who has the money. The problem we have is it's the wrong fucking price. We got the square footage for them.
Well, you can't have the government intervene on everything to solve. I mean, I know you understand this, but like, you can't have the government come in to intervene on every little thing because it just makes it worse.
Well, so then the people are talking about people I really like and who I really think are sharp, saying the Fed should be cutting rates. And it makes me crazy at this point because they say, okay, can we agree that for the last half century, the Fed has intervened and jammed rates too low for too long, too many fucking times, right? Can we all agree on that? And the answer is yes. Most will. And then I say, and so now you're saying we have to jam rates too low for too long again. I go, no, this gets back like my Luongo thing. I said, time for the crackhead to cold turkey that sucker. And it might not work, right? Crackheads don't come off crack easily.
But that's not. But the other thing people don't understand is that's not tied to what the mortgage rates are doing. So you dropping the Fed rates, it's not. The Fed dropping the rate. That's not going to mean all of a sudden housing is going to become affordable.
Well, that'll be a bond revolt then. That'll be the bond vigilantes who have been AWOL, right? So the bond vigilantes have failed to say, look, inflation is this high. We're not going to lend money for any less than this amount, even though you're trying to get us to lend it to us out cheaper. But at some point, when people finally realize their fixed income's a loser, and that they're losing money every year holding fixed income, then they're going to say, I'm not buying any of those bonds unless you pay me more. And that will be the ultimate bear market that has existed in the past, but not for half a century. And that is a bond and stock bear market that occurs simultaneously. Every time the market has gotten punched out, the 60-40 portfolio has been saved by the 40. Now, you got hurt, but if your 40% of your bonds went up 10% and your stocks went down 30, you just kind of covered about, 10%. And so you didn't get as hurt because your bond portfolio did well. If they both get crushed, if the bond interest rates go up, meaning the price of the bonds goes down, meaning if you mark to market, you've just lost a ton of money, and you could lose a ton. And because of that, because interest rates are up, your stocks go down. You're going to lose a ton of money there. That's going to be the ultimate. That's going to be a real 50% haircut, not just an equity haircut. And that's going to hurt.
I'm still shocked though that the system's been able to. I mean, on that front, that it's been able to hold together for as long as it has.
Something's elevating it. There's something artificial about it. That's my conclusion. You notice I've been posting a lot lately. Tweets that always say you got to love that price discovery. And I keep posting images of the market going up and then hitting a value and holding that value all day long. This is kind of Mike Green, the blindly retarded money, just constantly buying stocks, which at some point will end. Any good idea becomes a racket, becomes a crime syndicate, becomes a disaster. Just period. And so it will end. The passive investing will become a very bad idea, and it probably is very close. But it's paid so well for so long. Recency bias is such an unbelievable, compelling story. It's paid you to just buy and hold and buy the dip. And I see a 15% so-called correction, and 3 months later, it's back to where it started. I go, how's that a correction? Why did you correct? What's the definition of the word correction? And the guys say, well, they give definition. I go, well, that's a stupid definition because the word correct means to fix something. It didn't fix anything. Look at 2020. Dips, boom, back. We closed 2020. We had locked down the global economy. We had suffered what was potentially a global pandemic, although, a few years later, even most people now realize it wasn't. And so 2020 was as bad a year as you can have, period. And the markets were up 13%. How is that rational? It's not.
Well, yeah. But how long can this keep going for?
Not knowable. But I do know that at some point, it's certainly the trigger won't be a trigger. I like the trigger metaphor where you say, look, if you pull the trigger real slowly, you're still going to blow your head off. Right? At some point, I don't care how slowly you pull that trigger, it is going to fire that bullet. But the event, I think it'll be a slow grind. I think it'll be as the boomers start in earnest liquidating their assets, finding out that the next generation doesn't have the money to buy them off them. right? So if I want to move out of my house and move into an extended care, I have to sell my house. Who's going to buy it, right? If I die and my kids inherit it, they can't afford the taxes on it. McMansions are expensive as shit to live in. And this generation doesn't even want to. They've been brought up since daycare to think about green, to think about small carbon footprint. It's a good thing, actually, that part. The climate change crap is a colossal waste of their brain power, but it is a good thing about, cutting your footprint back and not using plastic shit for everything. And so they're not going to want it. My house is filled with 18th century antiques, and no one's going to buy them. You can buy an 18th century walnut slant front desk, Chippendale slant front desk, for less than the cost of the walnut. It is salvage pricing for that, because the next generation doesn't want them.
Why do you think the next generation is so? Do you think it's a mentality like owning a home is a pipe dream, or?
There's certainly a sour grapes component. I don't want a home anyway, that sort of thing. I think if they really thought they could buy a McMansion and live the American dream, they'd probably jump at it. But I also think you go from sort of 18th century antiques to chrome as a sort of a natural, when I was a kid, the only guys who wore their baseball hats backwards were retarded, right? And then all of a sudden the next generation figured out that we all thought they looked like retards if they wore their baseball hat backwards. So they all wear their baseball hat backwards. And I remember telling my dad that long hair was here to stay, and he said, "No, it'll go out of fashion." I didn't believe it, but it did. And remember when purple hair started showing up? You go, what kind of crazy bastard is that? And now you see grandmothers with purple in their hair, and you don't even think twice about it, right? So times change, and the next generation's not going to want to own this highly materialistic shit that the boomers got pretty attached to. So their net worth is not what they think. And then on top of that, let's look at all the pensions and endowments that are loaded with private equity. Oh my God, what a nightmare that's going to be. Did you interview Seidel? Was it you? Tom Seidel?
No.
Maybe it was Adam Taggart. You got to get Tom Seidel on. He is a pension expert. He does forensic accounting for pension plans. And it's hard to get hard numbers because the word private equity, the word private means you can't see it. Private debt, private equity, private credit market, Saving Private Ryan, private parts, you name it. Then the headlines of the next crisis are going to have the word private in every goddamn headline. Harvard has conservatively 40% of their endowment in private equity. I've seen people claim it's 80. I don't know what the numbers are. But private equity is filled with crap. They're the guys who bought $100 million office building that now is worth 20. But since they're private, they don't have to mark to market. So they're now claiming it's still worth 100. They're claiming it's worth 120. They can make shit up. And so, Melody Wright, you've met Melody on, right? A bunch of times. Melody, she'll tell you all about that market. The guys who are buying, Jordache jeans on layaway and DoorDash delivery.
The buy now pay later.
The buy now pay later crowd, when the things they're buying, if you're really tight for cash, you shouldn't buy them, and you sure as hell shouldn't buy them on layaway plans. And that market is estimated to be like a $4 trillion market. And that's like student debt. It's nasty stuff. And they have big, huge balloons in them, where if you don't pay, the price just what you owe goes way up. And so we're going to have, $4 trillion. Is $4 trillion a lot of money? It used to seem it. And I could imagine that $4 trillion market getting pretty close to zero. Right? You're gonna pay your heating bill before you pay your Barcalounger bill. Right?
I have Lox Ganapathy, Unicus Research, and she talks a lot about the buy now, pay later. Do you follow her?
What's her name?
She goes by the Unicus Research on X, but her name is Lox Ganapathy.
Unicus
Research.
How do you spell Unicus?
Unicus.
Unicus.
Cus.
Sorry to do this. Yeah, sorry to do this real time.
She's part of the gang with Melody and Jack and Amanda Goodall, who I just had on yesterday.
I watched Amanda Goodall. Unicus Research. I'm now following her. She was following me. I figure there's guys in my Twitter feed who are phenomenal, who I just don't know how to identify them.
It's hard. Well, and then some people I don't see them in my rotation, so I'm like, oh, what happened? You know who I haven't seen? I was just looking. I thought I subscribed to her on YouTube, but Daniela Camboni. I haven't seen anything from her.
I just saw her. She's been quiet because she switched from.
Was she not at ITM anymore?
No, she went to Andy Scheckman.
Oh, she did.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's Michelle McQuarrie.
Oh, you're right. I'm mixing up the babes.
Yeah, Daniela, I haven't seen, unless I'm just not, I
saw her the other day. I did see her the other day on a podcast.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I subscribed to ITM Trading, and
I get the highest click counts out of her podcast.
She
breaks my personal records when we do a podcast.
Oh, there's one from a day ago, so I was wrong. Okay, so for whatever reason, I'm not seeing it on my.
Although I should be able to break that record one of these days. Who knows?
But yeah, she just put on an episode yesterday. So for whatever reason, I just haven't seen it. But what were we talking? We're talking about the buy now, pay later.
Well, we're also talking about people embedded in your Twitter feed that could be unbelievable treasures, intellectual treasures. The kind of people you really want to follow, who you don't know how to identify.
Well, and also prior to that, with the younger people not wanting to own homes, and I think that and I try as best I can.
I think they want to own homes. But I don't think they want to own garish homes. As Tucker said I think it was the TPUSA talk. He said, you don't want to raise a family in an apartment if you can help it. It's hard.
I don't think they want to I don't think they want to own homes, though, Dave. I think a lot of them.
But they don't want 5,000 square feet.
But I don't think they want to even own it because, I mean, it could be way off here, but the idea of college is I think less and less are going to go. My friend Matt Smith's book is coming out, I think next week or the week after.
The number of colleges could cut in half, and we'd lose nothing.
Matt's book that he wrote with Doug Casey about his son, The Preparation, is coming out in the next couple of weeks.
I was really provocative, that idea. It's almost like an outward bound program or something, right? It's really. By the way, my son's wife and now my grandson are at a prep school called the Dublin School in Dublin, New Hampshire. And these kids, besides studying the usual high school stuff, have to go out and cut wood and have to go out and clear stuff. They help run the school, and they have to do hands-on labor. This is a prep school. It's real, and it's in the mountains in New Hampshire. And PJ O'Rourke's daughter went there. So one time I was sitting there, I was with dinner with PJ, and somehow the topic came up. He said, "Oh, my daughter's at the Dublin School." I go, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" And so Dublin School, put that on your radars, guys. Send your kids there if you're going to send them to a private school. It's very hands-on. That's what Matt Smith was talking about. I thought it was very clever.
Well, he put his son in. They went to. His son chose to do this, but he went to EMT school, and then from there, it led him to fight wildfires. Then from there, he learned how to sail, private pilot's license.
I've thought retiring. I had a passing thought of retiring if I didn't have other things to deal with, of getting a job every 4 months at some new place and say, "Look, I'm going to be here 4 months. I think I can do the job." McDonald's drive-through window.
Like Kevin Spacey in American Beauty? Or he worked at the fast
I
food
don't
window.
remember. I can't watch Kevin Spacey
Yeah,
anymore now
yeah.
that I know who he is. He drives me nuts.
One of the things that I can still watch some of my favorite movies he was in, like Usual Suspects, and
He's a great actor. Did you see him try to pretend like he didn't know who Epstein was? Did you see he got interviewed? He went full acting
it's,
mode. And he's going, well, I heard of the guy, and his name was familiar to me. And I'm going, you're lying your ass off, you douchebag. You and Ghislaine were sitting on the royal throne in Buckingham Palace. I think he whacked a couple people. I think his contacts did.
well, according to Trump, the whole thing's a hoax. So the question that Paul Craig Roberts said this: if the whole thing's a hoax, why is Ghislaine Maxwell even in prison? She shouldn't be in prison.
No, but don't forget the guys, for example, who did the Watergate did prison time. I think these guys who are deeply, deeply, deeply in these intelligence agencies, they view that as an assignment. She's in a club fed, and I think. Did you hear they didn't even interview her? They convicted her without deposing her, right? And I think that was her get out of jail free card. That they said, they say, okay, they'd have to throw the case out, and then boom, off she goes. So I don't think she was ever going to do 20 years. I've been predicting that she's not going to do 20 years. And I think like E. Howard Hunt, when he did Watergate, the whole Watergate thing was to take down Nixon. It wasn't that it took down Nixon. It was to take down Nixon, right? And they were every last one of them was deep state, including Bob Woodward, who was naval intelligence, right? And so I think Ghislaine was gonna do time, right? It's just okay, we'll get you out. And I think I've been wondering if all of a sudden Bongino, Patel, and these guys pulling back on Epstein is somehow profoundly correlated with Ghislaine stepping forward and saying she's willing to talk about Epstein. Somehow those two have to be tied to each other.
I don't know. I had Matt Bracken on the other day. I'd like to make that conversation happen with you guys. That'd be I think people
just give me a yell.
People would get a kick out of that, and you and Matt Smith too. I want to like the Matt Smith conversation. I want to make happen. Yeah. But Matt Bracken was saying, all the Epstein stuff, it goes back to Israel. It's not here. It's
That's
Israel.
The problem.
It's Israel. It's the Mossad.
It's always Israel. It's always Israel.
Yeah, I don't know. You listen to all this and you think to yourself, like the Bongino Patel. I mean, I didn't expect anything to come out of this stuff. I didn't expect the administration.
But I didn't expect that either, though, because the easy way out of that would have been saying, look, we're working on it. It takes a long time. It's a very complicated story, blah, 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 blah. They didn't have to do what they did. The move that I think was a faux pas, a slip of the tongue that was so poorly stated that couldn't have been scripted, was when Bondi, who I think is a nitwit, said, when asked, are we going to see the tape? She said, no, it's just child pornography. You're not going to see them. And I'm going, that's the problem right there. You just nailed it. Because we want to see the guys who are banging these kids. We want them.
Well, what about like I thought what Pete Canonis said was something that I had not heard. How were they blackmailed? What were they blackmailed with?
Well, one of the theories.
I don't know if you remember when he said that. I don't know if you remember when he said that.
Yeah, I do. But one of the theories is that the blackmail is not blackmail in the formal sense, but rather the social lubricant that, sort of like, bribe them with, kids and coke. And now implicit in there is a blackmail, but the most clever blackmail, you don't even have to ever blackmail the person. Right? You don't have to say, oh, by the way, we've got pictures of you. It's just implicitly you're now in the club. You're in Skull and Bones. You don't get to step out. Right? If someone said it's like being on a yacht. You get to party your ass off, but you don't get to leave the yacht. If you do, you go out the back of the yacht. So it's possible that it was as formally a blackmail as it was just just a club that's corrupt beyond our imagination. And implicit is that it doesn't take a genius to go, holy shit, if they do try to blackmail me, I'm in trouble, right? I think the most effective one is where they don't even have to say anything to you. Because then you're grumpy, right? They want you to be happy.
At that point,
so it's possible it isn't blackmail in the formal sense.
Well,
but then you say, well, what are the tapes about? That's the problem with that theory. What are the tapes about?
Well, and also too, whatever information they would put out, even prior to all this, you're not going to believe it. I mean, you're not going. That thing's been scrubbed so much.
So you listen to Tulsi
if there's even
Gabbard.
a list.
Tulsi keeps coming out and saying stuff that sounds. Forget about whether it's right or wrong, but it sounds like definitive declarative statements. So she, for example, came out supposedly, according to a Lou Rockwell post, and I haven't been able to confirm it independently, that she said that, look, we've got Obama dead to rights. And it's in her words, supposedly. But again, is that signal or is that noise?
That's what I was thinking. Well, here also with that, I mean, these people, Bondi, Patel.
By the way, can you hear my dog snoring? Because I can't.
A little bit.
Okay.
But
I one time did a podcast and I had my noise suppressing headphones on, and I had all the dogs, and it just came across like this big snore fest, metaphorically.
A little bit, but they take orders. Bondi takes orders. Patel takes orders.
But she also could have misspoken.
No, but I'm talking.
That is to say that I think her statement was a horribly phrased statement.
She could have, but what my point is though, with Tulsi, she takes orders too.
Oh, no doubt, but her statements. So the Russiagate, which could be to cover up the Epstein, if they're willing to give us Russiagate and throw all those bastards in prison, but they're not going to.
It's not going to happen.
I know it's not.
I get messages from people, and I put this on Twitter again, a reminder last night, and it's amazing what gets traction by what you write. Some things you write to go nowhere, and others get 20, 40,000 views.
Well,
or whatever.
Here's a weird one. Hold on. A lot of people know I.
Let me finish this thought. So, I got messages of like, oh, there's Tulsi and these people are gonna get arrested. I'm like, okay, let's step back. How many people got arrested in 2008? And at that point, you're talking about fraud, stealing of money.
Right.
Nobody died.
Right.
Nobody.
But it wasn't political.
But even still, no.
No, I agree. When was the last time? Name a famous person who went to prison.
Well, well, not only that. So now you're talking about Obama, the first black president. He still has people that like him. I don't get it, but there's still people that like him, love him, whatever. You really think that they were going to...
They think this is all fake.
Yeah, it's never going to happen.
They think this is all noise. But they think the things about Obama are all noise. I'm reading Jerome Corsi's book. It's got coup d'etat in the title. I can't remember the whole title. Jerome's impressive. I'm in a Zoom group with Jerome. And he's writing about this chapter, but he wrote about it 2 years ago. So this is going to be really interesting because as it plays out, I've got Jerome's narrative. And Jerome got deposed for 40 hours. He knew Roger Stone. He knew Manafort. He knew all these guys. And it'll be interesting to see how close Jerome's narrative comes to the narratives we get. And I asked him the other day, I said, you remember at the funeral of, I think it was George Bush Sr., and all the guys in the front row except Trump got an envelope in their packet, and they all freaked out. Did you ever see that video? So there's these. You get this like you get some sort of envelope or something that's the schedule of the ceremony, right? Kind of like you're at a concert or something. These are the things you're going to play, but it's a funeral, and they. Each one opens it up and there's an envelope in there, and they open it and they look at it, and they all look white as a sheet. And one of them shows the one sitting next to him, and they're trying to stay stone faced, and Trump never got one. So I got to figure Trump is involved in sending them. But I asked Jerome, I said, do you have any idea what was in those envelopes? He said, no, I don't. But boy, they sure looked like someone hit him with a truck. So there was something in those envelopes that was someone messaged them in a brutally public way.
What was his narrative then with this Russiagate?
Oh, the Russiagate stories from head to toe a fraud, right? The Russiagate stories. I wrote about Russiagate being a fraud back, years ago. It was obviously flawed beyond belief, and now it's all coming out. And I think they'll air the Russiagate story. Now, will anyone go to prison? Probably not. But I think there'll be people who go to their grave far less honorable than they thought they were going to. I think Obama could get beaten up, and there'll still be Obama lovers out there. But I think Obama, look at Fauci, right? The guy's going to go to his grave hated. He can't go out to dinner, right? Fauci can't go out to dinner. And some of these guys are really, and that's all they have, right? At some level, if you're trying to be an important person, right? That's what these guys are trying to be. They're trying to be historically important people. You take that from them, you've hurt them. It might not be the kind of hurt that Joe Sixpack gets when he robs a bank, but you've hurt them.
See, I almost wonder though with that, because these people are so narcissistic and they just don't give a fuck. And
well, that could be sociopathic.
Yeah, maybe it's
narcissism is
wrong word.
Narcissism. The person cares. The sociopaths don't care.
And they've made as much money as they can, and they don't give a shit. And wherever town they're at, nobody bothers them. They could probably go to a restaurant and go through the back door or whatever.
I hope not, but yeah.
They have no conscience, these people.
Yeah, that's the word. The book Sociopath Next Door is an interesting read. It's a very easy read, and it talks about the different kinds of sociopaths.
I think by the end of Trump's term, I think he's going to be very strongly disliked by the end. If he gets through the term, because you're hearing all these theories of he could get replaced or whatnot. But I think that and again, I could be way off. But I think
no. That's not contentious. The question I would ask you is: Do you think we're going to find out that he was an insider the whole time, or that he was duped?
I can't go by the duped anymore with any of that. It's been too long. He's been in office now for the second time.
Well, he certainly was there for 4 years, and so the duping he should be much more alert to.
I'm just not giving him a pass on any of this stuff anymore. And I mean, it's the other argument I've heard of, like, is he being occupied? Is he being controlled? Or, look, I'm not there.
Well, for example, Kennedy supposedly just declared that the mRNA vaccines are gone.
Yeah, but they're not gone. They're still on the shelf.
Well, it was just yesterday. So then the question is it possible that Trump set too high a bar in terms of the timescales of change? And now what we're discovering is it takes a lot longer. But, so Kennedy's been a bit of a paradox to me, because on the one hand, I thought he'd deal with some shit right away. And you got Bhattacharya and you got Marty Makary and these guys. I think they're the right people in the right job at the right time, but things are slow. Now, it could be that's just because the bureaucracy is so bloated and stuff, and that you just can't build the case. You can't do it as quickly as we would like it done. So
I'm just not buying any of that anymore.
That model requires you not yet know is the key.
Well, and I've heard all that, right? I've been hearing that for 5 years. I've heard it, and I've heard it, and I've heard it.
Well, this is a new administration.
No,
this is not 5 years. This is not 5 years.
No, and I know, but it's the same movie that I've seen over and over and over again. Not enough time, not enough this. So as I'm talking to you, I'm just looking up Mary Bowden's. Because she's usually right on top of this, Mary Talley Bowden. And she said yesterday, 17 hours ago, HHS Gov is meeting about mRNA tomorrow at noon. President of the United States, listen to the people and the doctors who have sacrificed much to tell the truth. I've never seen anything like this with any other product on the market. The shots must be pulled before more people get hurt. And she was sharing Trump, that video where he was still celebrating Operation Warp Speed. This, the how fast they were able to accelerate
Right.
it.
Right.
But what I've said since the get-go, and people can explain this a lot better than me, Big Pharma's not going away. It's not going to happen. There are too many people on antidepressants. There are too many people on Ozempic, Adderall, and whatever else is out there. Kennedy, they would have never let him in if they thought he was a threat to Big Pharma.
Well, I understand that because I thought they would not let him in. The fact that he got in, I'm not sure I'm willing to throw away the idea that for the last 30 years of his life, he's fought these guys. So I don't see why he would necessarily all of a sudden stop.
I agree. Wrote a couple books, I think, right?
But the real Anthony Fauci obliterated that narrative.
But maybe they look at it now, they're saying with Big Pharma, I mean, you saw Larry Ellison from Oracle, right at the beginning of the administration. Like, we've got something new.
Yeah, but he got hammered for that.
But he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
No, I know, but he also was speaking out of school. He doesn't know shit about what he was talking about. So that was just Larry Ellison speaking out of turn. The question will be is, can Kennedy slowly but surely chip away at this edifice?
No.
And
I'm sorry.
No. He might not be able to, but I think you can't. I don't think the date is in yet to tell you that. I think your pessimism is no, but I think it's possible that it just takes a long time to chip at it.
I'm going to forecast it. It's not going to happen, and we'll see. This is timestamps is recorded, and
do you think 3 years from now, Pharma will be advertising on TV?
That's a good question. It'll be advertising. Well, people don't watch as much TV anymore. Will it still be on the internet? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that is TV at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they couldn't advertise before.
No, there's only two countries that can, right? The United States and New Zealand.
Yeah. Another place I misjudged.
Here's the other thing, though, is we're talking about healthcare, and I do want to talk about you, Tucker. You're okay on time, though. You're fine on time. Yeah.
I'm fine. We've lost all but two of your viewers at this point, but yeah, I'm fine.
Well, as long as you and I are still here, that's the most important thing.
That's right.
But, with big tech at the White House last week, talking about healthcare and sharing information, it's interesting how they're centralizing this.
Yeah, well, that's where the Genius Bill and all that's where the Aaron Day interview comes in. I urge people to watch your Aaron Day interview. And he's probably got others out there that are just as good, but where I really got it was from yours.
And Matt did a write-up about this as well on his Substack, Matt Smith, where he was talking about, this is the intention of being able to share information, and he ties it all back into Israel's intelligence, and it was through DARPA. It was called theory mind warfare. And how with Israel, they were able to, based on modeling in this intelligence, to predict behavior. Hezbollah, for example, they knew that they were going to drop down their communications to low-level pagers and beepers, and because of that modeling, they were then able to infiltrate a supply chain to plant those explosives. So now, with the ability to share, like, our data, patient data, back and forth, they're going to be able to do more predictive modeling to determine our behaviors and move us into certain narratives. And that's
there's no question. That's true.
So with that, I mean, and now I'm just talking out of myself here, but pharma is going to be a part of that. So this whole notion of like Kennedy going to chip away, I mean, he's already talked about he wants wearables by the end of the term. Like,
yeah, he drives me nuts.
He's talked about all this with big tech.
He's paradoxical right now. I thought he'd be much clearer. I thought Trump would be making progress with Putin.
That's another. Do you ever think Trump is Putin, Netanyahu, the mullahs, Elon? You think they're all having dinner somewhere, just laughing at all this? Zelensky?
I've wondered about that. I've wondered if they're not all agreeing to, the kayfabe model.
They're like, wait, we can manipulate the whole world, turn everybody crazy, just by a few actions and some words from our spokespeople.
More than a few. It doesn't scare me that they know how to get me to buy something. That doesn't trouble me. It makes my shopping experience easier. I'm trying to find a on-demand hot water heater, and I get plenty of advertisements for them now.
Well, look at COVID. Look at how they moved our behavior during COVID. Matt wrote that in his Substack too, and he hit a YouTube video of like seven media.
Well, the question is, what was COVID about? There's about 10 different prevailing theories. One is the standard narrative is that it was a pandemic of overstated importance, and that they addressed it. The less standard is that they had the mRNA technology and they wanted to test it, and so they addressed it. There's the eugenics model that says they want to kill us off so that there's less useless eaters and this whole global debt problem goes away. And you can have a global debt problem. That's what people don't understand. Global debt problem is when everyone in the world thinks they're going to live a better life than the world is able to produce for them. That's a global debt problem. The other is it's just authoritarians being, why did Mao kill 40 million people? I don't think you can come up with an explanation that makes sense to a normal person, right? Or Stalin, again, 40 million. Just whipping many tens of millions, both of those guys. Why they do it? I don't know. I don't think a normal human being can fathom why you would do that. And so, but I do know that Pfizer knew that the vaccines were hurting people. I read the Pfizer papers. May God have mercy on my soul. It was not a fun read. But they knew all the damage being done. They knew about myocarditis. They knew about strokes. And they knew about, pregnant women miscarrying. They knew all sorts of shit. They knew everything. And they still released it. And they knowingly changed the protocol to create the vaccine without testing it at all. So all the DNA that made it through, they first had a highly purified version of the mRNA that they did the clinical trials, which was still hurting people. And then when they went to scale for the world, they said, fuck that. And the thing was laced with DNA. And the problem is there's an SV40 sequence, which allows the DNA to get incorporated into our DNA. So it goes straight to the ovaries and drops it into the ovaries. And I'm confident that most people, if they got checked, they'd have spike protein in their veins still, because I think your body's producing it for the rest of your life. And I think it's possible we did an evolutionary event where the next generation will produce it because it got into the germ cells.
Do you think, though, also with it is on several fronts, but that one in particular of like the COVID rollout, was at the predictive modeling to test that theory to see.
Well, the other theory is as to how to control people, right? So that's one of these, just propaganda in a higher order. Can we get the world to act nuts? And it worked pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, now the question I like to ask is, did they overplay their hand or did they play it at the level they wanted to? Now, if the idea was to test it and to see if they get us to respond, and us never know it, they overplayed their hand because we know it now, right? We know it in a big way. It's also possible that their goal is to do it and us to know it, and they're just gaslighting us. They just said, yeah, we got you. There's nothing you could do, and you're not going to stop CBDCs, and you're not going to stop any of this shit. So give it up, So it might have been to demoralize us. And then they didn't overplay it; they played it just right.
And the shot rollout, they didn't care if hundreds of thousands, millions of people get injured or died. Right. Just like the it's like the border where.
Well, there is a problem though. People are not going to vaccinate. You getting another flu vaccine? Not me.
But they've moved on from that now. They've moved on. They know. Oh yeah, of course they're not going to lock down again with COVID. They won't do it that way. People aren't going to fall for that. They'll fall for something else, though. If there's a big
some nuclear holocaust threat
or economic crash, and the only way to salvage, get some of your life back, your lifestyle back, is to move over to this new digital currency.
That's right. Here's stimulus money. It's coming in the form of of CBDC.
Universal basic income. I mean, some type of,
Right.
and we saw that tested during COVID, how they could put the money right into your bank accounts.
Right. Right. And we got inflation big time. The other problem in the next big crisis is inflation's going to show up very quickly
And people are,
because it's now in our DNA.
and people are, in my opinion, I mean, people are struggling right now just to get through.
So there's a paradox there too, because if you go up to any convenience store, you'll see help wanted, $22 an hour. And at the same time, Joe Sixpack, who presumably would be doing that job in theory, apparently doesn't want that job. So what's that all about? How can you have help wanted signs everywhere while the down and out person who normally has to do that job is not available? That's a paradox. That's the problem for me.
But I also look at it like, I ate out so much, over my time, visiting, and my God, what you're paying for food prices and what you're getting.
Ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't eat, so I do takeout without hesitation. And one of the ways I compensate is there'll be nights where I'll eat a can of Hormel chili on minute rice, right? And as a consequence, the takeout the night before that cost me, 17 or $18 for me is averaged into a night where it costs $2. But I don't go to expensive restaurants. We don't do expensive vacations. So I'm in a cabin here, but we own it. The cabin was built 120 years ago, so the mortgage is long since gone. Probably never had one. And that's our vacation. So we don't drop 20K on some cruise or something like that. And so, but I also won't go to a high-end restaurant. So my son is a gluten obsessive, and so a lot of restaurants are excluded, right? And so we went to this restaurant called Hungry Trout where they serve fish and things like that, and three of us, $200. And I go, we could get 4 takeouts from a Chinese restaurant for $200, right? So I don't do that. I probably do that once a year, and I don't have a big financial footprint the way I live personally, except for the takeout. That's my weakness is Thai food, but
Mine's coffee and just beef and butter.
and butter. I noticed the butter. Yeah. Well, these guys who go get lattes at Starbucks or whatever, I go, why not make your own?
Yeah. I don't go out and get it like I used to. I mean, I just drink it at home. But yeah, I mean, I live very, very modest. I mean, really, really modestly, very cheaply in a sense. I mean, but I'm a single guy too, so it's not like I don't need a lot.
Yeah, right. Well, my brother's married but has no kids, and he was an accountant in Aspen, so he did okay. There's a funny phenomenon when you retire. Apparently, almost like to the day that you retire, you start getting obsessive over counting the beans. And you can sit there and have a ton. I remember when my dad was 84, 85 years old. He was a contractor, big contractor. He and his 3 partners had a company that had 350 employees, right? That's a big contractor. And when he was 84, he said something to the effect that, if my retirement money holds up, and I'm going, Dad, you can go batshit. You can go out of your mind. You can't spend the money you've got. But you get obsessive over it. And so the minute the revenue stops, your sphincter muscles tighten right up. And if people have retired and then we go into a downturn, oh my God. In particular, the world does not feel euphoric, right? Nothing feels euphoric. If we are anywhere near a market top, it's supposed to feel euphoric. Right? Every other market top I've ever seen, whether it was '07, everyone gets to buy a house. Isn't this great? Some of us saw the problem coming. The dot-com bubble was absolutely, the world is changing right in front of our eyes, right? The Nifty 50 in the 60s, the world was spectacular. So there was always euphoria tied to a narrative that was convincing, and right now there's no convincing narrative. And they're trying to make AI the convincing narrative. No. In fact, people are looking at AI going, what's it going to do to our economy? It might help in some ways, but it's going to be a tough adjustment. So we drop 50% off out of every retirement account. I do not want to. People are going to be grumpy, really grumpy.
Well, there's that part of it, and also, it hasn't happened yet, but I didn't buy into the notion of the Civil War last year, or even right now, like this idea of like people are going to take guns to the streets. But
do you think they're too wimpy?
Well, okay, so you look at the big tech, right, and the people that are at the top. You're not taking those people out, and let's just say,
right,
Jeff Bezos.
It would have to be more of a French Revolution, not a civil war.
You're going against an invisible enemy of technology.
I know,
and the way you can't defeat it. The only way to defeat it is, people have to slowly withdraw from the system, and like you said earlier, the more processes and workflows eventually it just breaks.
Right.
So that is a way it could happen, but that could take years. It could happen tomorrow.
Well, that's why my model is not an event, but rather a slow rot.
Well, but the other side of it is though, and I put cities, doesn't even matter blue or red, they're all the same. Cities and schools.
Well, there are no blue cities, red cities. So.
No, yeah, there's no red major cities. So. You saw in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago where that woman got beat up, and the chief of police. Why the fuck would be chief of police of a city?
Could she be?
Well, not only that, but what is a woman, a chief of police in a city like that? And I just found out Cleveland's chief of police is a woman too. You can't physically.
Well, that's a residue from the DEI woke shit.
And then the mayor of Cincinnati, like his response when asked if he even made a call out to her, and he said he hadn't. But at what point, Porter Stansberry wrote about this. At what point are people going to say, fuck it, I'm taking the matters into my own hands?
If you had Porter on, I can't remember.
Yeah, a couple of months ago.
I think I saw it.
But also the school board meetings, where you had, the board members just cutting the mics off of the parents and say, that's it, meeting's over. At what point are parents going to be like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm running across, I'm lunging at these people.
So I occasionally get my blood in a boil. And I know it's counterproductive because in some sense it might be the goal of the bad guys. But imagine you have someone in prison for January 6th. And you got a guard in there who's torturing them, which is what the rumors were. Let's speak of a hypothetical person. What is preventing a family member from capping that guard's ass?
But I look at even bigger. Bigger than that are these people that live in these cities that are just, they can't afford to get out and they just want to make a living, and they
can't afford to stay either.
Well, maybe they can afford to stay, but law enforcement is not helping them. The areas have just deteriorated so much, and they're getting no help. Where people might just say, "Fuck it, I'm taking matters into my own hands," or a neighborhood is taking matters into their own hands.
Right.
It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened yet, but
Curtis Sliwa is running for mayor of New York. He's not going to win, of course, but Curtis Sliwa is running for. Do you know Sliwa?
I do. Never met him, but
he's running for mayor of New York, and that's kind of a renaissance of a man who had gone fairly quiet.
He ran last time though too.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. Didn't he run Andrew Giuliani or no? Wasn't he running with against Andrew Giuliani and Lee Zeldin, and then Lee Zeldin ended up being the nominee but didn't win? Oh, you said mayor.
I don't
Did you
know.
say mayor?
Mayor.
Oh, he ran for governor, I think. Never mind.
You're thinking of Andrew Cuomo?
No. Sliwa, I thought he was attempted to run for governor.
I don't remember that. I don't remember running for anything, actually. The last time I saw him, I think he was talking about defending a guy's business from rioters during the George Floyd riots. And he was talking about, bodies flying, that it was a real brawl.
I want to talk about Tucker, and but I first want to talk about Tucker and then talk about your time there. But first, I want to get your take on what's going on with Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes and Tucker. And
well, I wouldn't mix Candace with Fuentes.
Well, he was.
Well, they're fighting each other.
Well, Fuentes was on her show. I don't know
my
did you know that though? Did you know that though? That Fuentes was on her show?
I did. Well, I didn't until she relayed that to Tucker.
Oh, so you didn't see any of it?
I didn't see her and Fuentes.
Oh, see, I saw most of it.
And how did it go?
You know what? I thought it was good, but she kept referencing Dave Smith, who's obviously a friend of hers, and like Fuentes' attacks on Dave Smith. And I was like,
why would Fuentes attack Dave Smith? Why would he attack Dave Smith?
I think in simple terms, I think where he's coming from is and he said the same thing to her. And in part of it, what she had said to him, because she criticized him for not being married. And Fuentes. Stay with me for a second on this, because I'm taking it to a point. There's a point where I'm going with it. And she criticized him for not having a family, not prioritizing family, meeting somebody and having kids and yada, yada, yada. And he said, you've got to understand, and I'm paraphrasing, but you've got to understand, in my position, anybody I bring into my world has to take on what I'm taking on. I can't get a credit card. I can't get paid through PayPal. There was a period where I was on a no-fly list. Somebody showed up my door trying to kill me. So for you to judge me for not having those things, it's not fair, because I didn't get I haven't gone the traditional route like you did. I didn't get money from Turning Point. I didn't get money from PragerU or Daily Wire. And he goes, that's all. I'm not mad that you got those things. That's great. He goes, but I didn't get that stuff. He goes, I've been getting attacked since I was 18 years old when I was in Boston University. And that's where the whole Tucker thing also comes in. And I think his point is with people like Dave Smith and he's like, I was talking about this at 18. Where were you guys? Now you're talking about all this with Israel?
Well, Fuentes is pretty acerbic.
What does that mean?
Right?
Provocateur?
Unnecessarily provocative, right? I mean, Fuentes is at some level kind of a caricature of a provocateur.
There's a group of them. There's a group of them that are provocateurs, I would say. Laura Loomer is another one.
Yeah, Laura Loomer would fit into that category.
Milo is one of them.
Oh, Milo was the king.
Chris Burnett, I'd put in there.
Not ringing a bell.
Oh, he was the one that he was going. He exposed. Maybe it'll come back to me. I'll bring it up.
But so Fuentes reminds me of sort of a right-wing version of that. What's that guy's name? Henry Kissin or something?
Harry Sisson.
Harry Sisson, right? Harry's pathetic. I mean, I don't listen to Fuentes very much. I catch it only when it sort of crosses my field of view. And Harry Sisson is just a ridiculous bastard. The guy who started out as a provocateur but seemed to sort of slowly grow a sense of logic, in part because I think he's a smart kid, is David Hogg. I had a very low opinion of David Hogg, and then he became one of the three heads of the DNC. I go, how the fuck did that just happen? And then he started talking about shit that I thought made sense, and then they booted him from the DNC, and I'm going, well, it must have made sense because they're not going to tolerate logic. So that's the problem I have with Fuentes. I don't think he's necessarily trying to get the truth as much as just stir it, just really cause trouble. Our provost said to a free speech group they wanted us to invite Ann Coulter, who had been kind of railroaded off the campus so she couldn't give her talk. And I wasn't a big fan. And they said, why? And I said, because it's a trophy talk. If as a conservative, I want to hear Thomas Sowell. I want to hear John McWhorter. I want to hear smart guys talk about conservatism in coherent ways. And Ann Coulter's going to stand up there and just piss everyone off just because that's her shtick. So she's a provocateur, right? And so in many ways it doesn't advance her agenda beyond just her agenda, her personal agenda. And so I'm not interested in what Ann Coulter has to say. And so Fuentes falls in that category for me. And he might hit upon, I don't give a shit about Andrew Tate.
Yeah, I don't care about any of that.
These guys are professional troublemakers, and I don't sense a quest for truth as much as just a quest for fame.
Well, there's also with some of those guys, and not to say that what they're speaking about isn't valid, but there's also no moral compass with some of these guys and their behaviors and their past behaviors and I don't know. I mean, but with him, with Fuentes, I find some of the things he said, I find it very interesting. And one thing about him, I mean, the guy doesn't give up. He's a talented guy on the microphone.
I know, but a provocateur has got to be smart, right? They you can't be a provocateur and not have points to make, right? Adolf Hitler had points to make, and so they're going to have them, but it's not a person I'd want to tie my wagon to, even if I agree with some of their points. David Duke, they're just guys I wouldn't want to be affiliated with, because for one thing, the guys I like, so lefties, for example, that I like, someone like Bill Maher, who I disagree with half of what he says, but what I agree with is he has the ability to cross the center line and to take the stance that so he's not, who was it who said this? Anna Kasparian did an interview with Tucker.
I didn't watch that. Was it good?
I thought it was, because she kind of conveyed the idea of being a captive to your followers. So if you're a hodler, for example, and you have me on, and I have no interest in Bitcoin, the followers of that podcast, many of them will say, why the fuck do I listen to this crap? I want to hear about Bitcoin. I go, well, when that person starts catering to that, they are a prisoner of their followers. And that's a problem. And so I don't want to hear from people who are a prisoner of their followers.
But I also, watching Candace and Tucker talk, and then Fuentes' response to it, I'm like, I just want to see those two sit down. I want to see those two talk to each other.
Well, but the problem is, according to Candace, and again, this is one-sided because I didn't hear him, she said he was just disingenuous. And she wants nothing to do with him. So, and that's if he's disingenuous, that's a rational response.
I didn't.
Don't engage. Don't engage.
I didn't get that sense from that conversation. Now, mind you, I didn't listen to the whole thing because I was so tired.
Oh, she said she wants nothing to do with him.
No, I know, but I mean with him and her, with Fuentes and Candace. I was like, all right, I don't want to, let's you two talk, not talk about, kind of like when Douglas Murray was on Rogan and he just kept bashing Daryl Cooper, and yet Daryl Cooper wasn't there. So it's like, why am I listening to an hour about...
when he went against Dave Smith, he got clobbered.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, that's what I'm talking about. He kept bringing up Daryl Cooper, and it's like, okay, Daryl Cooper's not here. So why are you spending an hour talking about what Daryl Cooper said? He's not there. So let's just sit here and debate, talk about what's going on. And with Candace and Fuentes, from what I listened to, that she brought up Dave Smith. It's like, okay, Dave's not here. Like, you two talk about, talk to each other back and forth, but Dave's not there to defend himself.
According to Candace, they did talk, and she thought they had a sincere conversation. She thought they found common ground, and then as soon as it was over, he went out on social media and shit all over her. And she said, I want nothing to do with that. That's the problem. So if you and I had this chat and we got into it and we disagreed on what Trump's going to do and shit, but we found common ground. And then all of a sudden, I'm reading tweets from you saying Collum's such an asshole for this and this reason. Well, am I going to do another podcast? No. You can disagree, but I do not want someone shitting on me afterwards. And Tucker said he had the same experience.
I just think it'd be, I look at it like, I was thinking about this morning, and I'm a huge boxing person, right? Like I love boxing, and people will say I'm off the wall by using this analogy, but I looked at this Mayweather-Pacquiao, and I don't know if you remember this, but this was like the fight they were talking about for 5 years. Both guys, they're trainers, promoters, everywhere they go, they're like Mayweather-Pacquiao, Mayweather-Pacquiao. And it finally came to materialize. It was too late, but eventually it came to be because they made so much money. They made like $600 million combined, whatever it was, hundreds of millions of dollars these guys got. And it wasn't by chance. It was done intentionally. They both were at an NBA game, one side of the floor and the other side of the floor, and they went up afterwards in the middle of the floor and they talked, and supposedly that's where the negotiations started, which was all bullshit. But you've got two, totally. And and they didn't have to do a press tour. You didn't have to do any of that because it just sold itself. To me, you've got two media heads, right, where both audiences want to see them talk. Give the fight fans, give them what they want. Give them what they want.
They did that.
I'm talking about Tucker and him.
I don't know. I'm not as clear on Tucker's exchange with Fuentes, but Candace. Oh, yeah. Candace did precisely that, and then she said he just repeatedly stabbed her in the back. This reminds me a little of Whitney Webb going at Dawson.
Have they ever gone at it? I know I've seen little exchanges, but I don't know what to make of that. Like, because I've heard that Whitney takes his work. I think they're both great.
That's what Dawson says.
Right.
I was on a Zoom call with Dawson one night, and it was kind of this odd, creepy, weird thing. It was really informal, and I said almost nothing at the Zoom call. It was just about four of us pseudo chatting, but I really just kind of listened. My instinct said, "Don't go back." My instinct said, in theory, I could have said, "Hey, send me the next time you guys chat," something. And now he's got a great rep among some people, so I might have totally misread the guy, but I don't understand these guys who feel like they have to fight when they disagree, when in theory they're kind of 90% on the same side.
Clicks, right? Clicks, likes, traffic.
Well, and that gets back to the lack of sincerity then, right? You are a prisoner of your followers. And so...
one thing about Milo, though, he attacks everybody. I mean, that guy's consistent.
Well, he was a pioneer. And what's interesting about Milo is that there were two different Milos. One was the Milo who was in a hostile territory, and he could shred his opponents. And the other was Milo where he was not in hostile territory, and he could articulate his ideas. So one was purely, wife-beating, world championship, and the other one was Milo expressing ideas that were worth listening to. And both had their entertainment value, but Milo was the god of provocateurs.
The Godfather. He was the Godfather of.
Yeah, well, he work for Breitbart. Didn't he work for Breitbart, right?
Yeah. How did he end up?
Well, Breitbart died mysteriously. So
what took him down though? Because he was down. He's back on the circuit. He was just on with Candace.
He at one point fessed up to being abused as a child, which kind of vaccinates you against some stuff. But then he proceeded to say something that was inferred as that not being a problem. And they used that as an excuse to take him off social media. And so there was this gigantic pile up that occurred almost instantly. And it was essentially a cancellation, right? They just said, let's take him down. And he just disappeared. They just vaporized him. and it came from that idea of him talking about getting abused and then talking about how it wasn't that big a deal.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been made public yet, but he was just on Candace's show.
It hasn't been broadcast?
No, it's out there. She puts it behind a paywall for a while.
Okay.
That's what Fuentes, you couldn't access it. There were pirate videos that were on YouTube, but it was behind a paywall for the first 2 weeks.
I learned something this week where if you quote the lyrics of a song, I wrote about the elections in 2016, and a copy editor is going through it and getting it ready for a book form. And I showed a picture of Trump and Hillary going at it face to face with their microphones. And then I cited 4 lines of the lyrics, islands in the stream, this is what we are, blah, blah, blah. And the guy said, it is a very complicated thing to quote lyrics of a song. You have to get permission. And it can get very expensive. He said, we ought to take it out. I'm going, really? You can't just quote the lyrics of a song? And apparently that's a world where they're very protective of their, needle drop. And then later when I quoted the Stones, and it was 1 line. And he said, same comment. And I said, no, that's just 1 line. I'm just quoting the Rolling Stones now.
You're even citing it. You're even citing what the line is and who the author of it is.
Right. It's just they said it, right? They happen to have music associated with it, but they said it. So I actually don't understand the law of citing the lyrics. But he said that ought to be taken out, which struck me as oppressive.
So, any idea when this Tucker episode's coming out?
Well, at this point, the answer is no. So the backstory is, his booking agent reached out to me. I noticed one of his previous booking agents followed me a couple years ago on Twitter, and I go, oh, that's interesting. They don't follow people for no reason. And then I got an email from a booking agent that was a different one. And she said, we'd like to get you on Tucker. And so we scheduled a May 19th interview, and that got canceled. Then we scheduled a July 3rd interview, and then that got canceled. The July 12th interview, and then that got canceled. And then not 19th, July 19th, and I made it to Maine, and we spent an hour and a half talking at breakfast, which I think is all part of the thing, because I think that's where he figures out who you are. My suspicion is that Tucker couldn't have picked me out of a lineup until that moment, right? That his staff does the heavy lifting and tells him what to talk about and, gets you talking. So we spoke for an hour and a half, and then we interviewed for somewhere a little over an hour and a half, I think, probably an hour and 40. But I don't know what it'll edit down to. The staff came out when he went to take a piss break, and they seemed exuberant, but I'm not sure they're not paid to come out and act exuberant. So for all I know, it's boring as shit. I mean, I just don't know. And then he came back and we finished. And then after it was over, we got into some of the dark shit I like to talk about. I don't want to speak out of school because, he did. And 3 times when we were talking, he turned to his staff and said, we're not recording, right? And it what I'll tell you is it went into Satanism. And Tucker had way, way, way more to say than I ever would have expected. And I would have loved to have recorded that part. And then at one point I quoted Daniel Ellsberg on something. He got so excited he pulls out his phone and went and finds the quote. And his whole staff sitting there listening to the conversation. And he reads the whole quote. And it's a quote from Ellsberg to Kissinger about what he will experience when he gets this top security clearance. But Tucker was ecstatic when I mentioned the Ellsberg quote. I got a friggin' dog that's driving me nuts here. that hit a sweet spot on him. So in any event, it seemed to go well. I have no idea what we talked about. Again, we certainly talked about finance at the end. We talked about the COVID, I think. Talked a little bit about college. If there was a period of disappointment, I would say that probably I probably failed to throw universities under the bus as much as Tucker would like. That would be my guess. And there were several times where, I got canceled, and Cornell at some point denounced what I said, which was nothing. I said nothing. I stand by it was nothing. But he kept trying to get me to throw Cornell under the bus. And I said they were just trying to put out a fire. They were just, and at least twice, I said no. They were just trying. I said, look, the provost who signed this letter saying that what I said was not appropriate was a friend of mine. That I said the chief of police signed it. My statement was defending the cops, right? They were just trying to tell the cancel mob to shut the fuck up, right? Okay, here we've denounced them now. Shut the fuck up, right? And it worked. I was having chats with trustees. I know a couple. And they were saying Cornell shouldn't say anything. I had 2 trustees walk into the president's office and say, don't even think about doing something stupid here. And but then they eventually wrote a letter saying that, what Professor Collum said, we don't stand by. And what I actually said was, remember the guy who got knocked over in Buffalo? This will be on tape. QTR, Chris Irons, we were going to do a podcast on Saturday, and he posted it and said, this is just awful. And I watched the video, and I said, the old man gets knocked over by riot police. And I said, well, we can talk about it on Saturday, but I don't know what he was doing in a riot zone. I said, he was poking the cops for reasons I don't understand, with something, I don't know what it was, almost looked like a taser or something. It turns out it was a skimmer. And I said, it looks kind of self-inflicted to me. I didn't say he deserved it. Self-inflicted is not deserved it. But if you poke a riot policeman and he knocks you on your ass, that's on you, period. My wife got mad at me for getting canceled on that. I said, Candace, would you please read what I wrote? I didn't write anything bad. The guy poked riot police and got knocked on his ass. And I said, it's self-inflicted. That is self-inflicted, right? Like having sex with hookers, wondering why you got syphilis. And it turns out the guy was a fraud. He was a total fraud. The whole thing was a grift. He made a ton of money. And I even have video footage of him. I've got a photograph of him talking on a cell phone behind the ambulance where he supposedly was in a coma. And so at the end, when I wrote about this, I said, are you sure that what I said doesn't represent Cornell's values rhetorically? So we talked about that. So there were, I don't know, might be boring as shit. It might.
Sure, it's not going to be boring. I mean, I was excited that you got a chance to go speak with him. And,
to me, that's a big moment. Forget about whether it's good or bad. That's a big moment.
Well, it's just and it comes back to what I said earlier with the Fuentes stabbing, whatever. I just want to hear those 2 talk. I'm a 2 media heads, one representing a younger audience, a big younger audience. Tucker is the pinnacle, up there with Rogan, and I don't even know who else I'd put in that category right now. But
in terms of numbers, I did a little fishing. Someone like Sean Ryan is up there, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, Sean I forgot Ryan, about him.
Yeah,
but
Tucker was number 1 at one point.
But there's a couple that you can count on your hand, and the fact that you went up there and sat with him and talked for an hour and a half. I mean, that's amazing, and that's I just love to see like some of these bigger titans sit down and talk to each other.
So I'd said on a couple of podcasts, probably including yours, that I was supposed to do a Tucker podcast. It hadn't happened yet. So now I'm thinking, okay, you're starting to look more and more like an asshole because it's not crystallizing. But I finally sat down with him and said, okay, got off that hook. And it was probably 3 weeks ago, and it still hasn't posted. And some of the things that did post, I go, well, first of all, when I asked them, when do you expect the postage, the booking agent, who's about 23 years old and hotter than a pistol, said about August 3rd. So we're not way overdue. Mm. But I keep seeing like this woman Roberts, who wrote the book about Oklahoma City bombing, which is also not timely. I don't think my interview's timely. Candace Owens, you could argue, maybe is timely, right? So, I'm sitting there going, I congratulated him when we sat down. I don't think it was on. Again, I don't know what was on screen, but I said, you congratulations on the hat trick. You got the president of Russia, you get the president of Iran, and now you got some guy named Dave.
Did they tell you when they were about to record, or you had no idea? There's no 3, 2, 1.
Oh, they roll. They say rolling.
So you're aware.
So yeah, we were sitting at a breakfast table, and then we go to the table. I warned him. I said 2 things. One is I usually wear headphones because I usually am rocking around, and the headphones stay with me, but I roll around. I said, I know you do a free mic, but they tuck you right in so you can't move. And I said, the second thing is, I'm like the kid in the playground, the jungle gym, with the leash and the helmet on to prevent him from hurting himself. And I said, so you're gonna have to reel me in occasionally. He said, well, that is my job. So I warned him about reeling me in.
When you guys talked after, and he was shedding light on things,
very dark, very dark.
What was your reaction hearing these stories? Like deeper than you
imagined?
How
dark I am? You know how dark I am on these things? He's darker.
How so? As best you can elaborate.
He says, I know the people. He says, I know these people. And no matter what I said, he went darker.
So exceeded your expectations.
So then the surreal thing, and I can't name this guy because this was via a series of DMs, but there was a guy, and if the name comes, you don't say it. I'll tell you afterwards. But a prominent journalist was watching Mangione trial, and this was the night. This happened like the night or the next day, but real close to the timing of talking to Tucker. And I'd noticed him making comments about Mangione that seemed cryptically interesting, and I'd been tracking Mangione. So I'd concluded Mangione was, the Mangione shooting of the healthcare guy was all fucked up, completely fucked up. One of those shootings that you go, that's not a normal shooting. I don't think any of them are, actually. And this journalist, this famous journalist, had made a few comments that told me he was smelling something. So I sent him a DM, and he had done an interview talking about Mangione. And I said, you talked all about how weird it was, but you didn't say who you thought was behind it. And he gave me some cryptic comments. And then he said, I'm interested in knowing what you think it is. And I said, well, okay. And I said, I think he's an MK Ultra product. I think he's a trained assassin. And that's what did it. And he's got personalities that seem to fluctuate all over the place, just like the MK Ultra victims are. And then he unleashed a torrent of DMs talking about how correct that is, how he's written about things like this, which I got to get out of him, and how crazy that world is. And I'm sitting there going, holy fuck, I just finished talking to Tucker about this shit. Now this guy, who's a famous guy, I see him on Fox News. And all of a sudden he's talking like as batshit crazy as me. I run into these rabbit holes I've been digging and trying to understand, trafficking, pedophilia, satanic cults, things like that. I'm going to write about it. I am writing about it. I'm running into too many people who are smart, educated, superficially normal people who have gone down these rabbit holes and come out different. And like when you and Jim and I talk about it, Jim's reluctant to go down those, right? He doesn't bite on conspiracy theories quickly. But we were doing a podcast with you, I think, where you mentioned Elizabeth Nixon and Kamala Harris, and which shocked him because he said, Kamala Harris, he said as Nixon had claimed that Kamala Harris had all the traits of a trafficked woman. And he said that something about Nixon's mother had been trafficked through an asylum in Canada. And I said, yeah, McGill University. And Jim sort of flinched on our podcast. And he was surprised I knew that it was McGill. I said, yeah, that was the CIA headquarters. And that's where a huge amount of stuff was done at McGill University. A guy named Ewan Cameron. And she was head of Time Magazine European division. And she concluded that Kamala Harris was a Manchurian candidate who had been brainwashed and her brain fried and multiple personalities and the whole enchilada. And I'd been tracking that, but that was kind of the straw on the camel's back for me when she signed off. And I said, okay. And Candace Owens had been tracking it. So I'd been picking up on Candace's plot lines. Candace was pointing out that all of Kamala's relatives were not her relatives. Then you get the whole Macron story, which is just outlandish.
That story just doesn't interest me at all. Somebody else asked me about that. I said, the only thing I think the significance is the fact that they're suing her and they don't live in the United States for criticizing them. So that part of it, but in terms of, I just don't care about that story.
See, I have a totally opposite view of that. I think when the leader of one of the most important countries in the world is married to a dude without admitting it, who might also be his biological father, the world just changes. That just totally. I've told you about JFK Jr. reading Monica Lewinsky's poem that she wrote when she was 9 years old, and she was clearly trafficked based on the poem she wrote. And so that rewrites a big chapter of history in which Monica was not just a groupie going after Clinton; she was a trafficked woman, right? Which then connects her up with Epstein and all this shit, right? And so I think these are politically important events. I think that the fact that I can show you a picture of the Prime Minister of Great Britain at 9 years old being hugged by the most famous pedophile in the history of Europe, right? And I'm going, that rewrite. I've been on Zoom calls with Andrew Bridgen, who is who's a parliamentarian, and I can't remember all the different positions, but he took a bunch of data to MI5, MI6, saying, here's the data showing that things are fucked up. He said, crickets, nothing. I couldn't get him to name names because I don't think he wants to die. I think I'll start with that premise. And so I think these are important. I think this is important because I don't think you can understand geopolitics if you don't understand how fucked up the leaders are and how compromised they are. Because then you go, okay, why'd you open the borders? Well, it doesn't have to be a simple explanation. Why did Biden open the borders? There's no simple explanation that's remotely helpful for that.
But I also think, I thought they were all compromised even prior to that. I don't know, that story just hasn't. I mean, you brought up very good points right there. It's stuff that I had not considered. They were compromised
at a level of Peter Schweitzer levels, right? Having accepted money, but that's that's a compromise, having sex with blonde bimbos, and that doesn't sell anymore. These guys are compromised in ways that are the depths of human depravity. And that's different, in my opinion. And that way, that's why people are mad at the Epstein story, because they know there's human depravity there. It's not just some guy who had 18-year-old girls to bang powerful people. And it also matters if, for example, you find out that, the head of the Supreme Court was banging minors.
Do you think that story's going away?
No. I think the MAGA guys got deeply wounded by that. And I think you can put some salve on the wound by going after, the Russia collusion guys. But no, I don't think it's going away. Now, what does it mean to not go away? Well, did Kennedy's assassination go away? No. Right? But we haven't made any progress on it either. So.
What was your takeaway then of just Tucker Carlson? You watched him for a long time, but you had an opportunity to sit with him, share a meal, be interviewed. What are your thoughts now?
I think you kind of get what you see. I think that despite there were topics that we didn't record that would shock people. I think I asked about. I'll cause him to. He knows every person in the administration, and I asked him about so and so, and he says I talk with that person all the time, and they are truly shocked at what they're seeing, without elaborating, without going into detail. But I said shocked as in like it is shocking, or shocked even to a person who expected it to be shocking. He said the latter. He said they could not have fathomed what they're now seeing. In relation to what, though? That was in relation to Russiagate, probably, but who knows? This is a person in a high-level position, so it's related to Bongino and Patel. To explain Bongino and Patel, I think the best explanation is they got to see what the Epstein story was, and they realized that no matter how much everyone wants it, they can't release it. Sidney Powell, Trump's lawyer, said that if you release the Anthony Weiner laptop, governments would be falling all over the world.
But then you have the people that says, all right, where's your morality then, moral code? If you can't protect kids, what good is our system? What kind of government is this?
Well, that's what Tommy Kerrigan said in a podcast. And I get that, but it ultimately comes back to, do you really want to light the world on fire to get the truth out, right? So it's like Diana West, right? We left 20,000 people in the Soviet Union in gulags, U.S. soldiers. No one knows that. Very obviously, people do know it, but the average person doesn't know that. They'd be appalled by that. And it reached a point where we just wanted to button it up. We just wanted to tie it down. We're trying to cover up what Israel's doing because of the chaos that would ensue if you really knew the story. And I think we kind of do know that story. I don't think that story is that opaque. But circling back to that one, I think I've never seen. I was shocked when anti-Semitism showed up as fast as it did after October 7th. I have come to realize that the Israeli government has done more to create anti-Semitism than I ever could have fathomed. And I would call upon the Jews of the world to speak up and say, if you don't want to be the baby thrown out with the bathwater, it's time for you to speak. I blame the scientists not speaking up about COVID and stuff like that, not speaking up about climate change, stuff like that. If at some point you lose all your funding because the world does finally figure out that you've been getting funded by a scam model, you could be doing great science. Good scientists will find ways to get the money and then do the right stuff. That's standard. So you promise to save the world and then you study something that you care about. But if you don't clean up the garbage, then you will become a victim. And so if you're involved in farming, you somehow don't clean that up. Don't be surprised when the populace finally figures out that you are killing people.
But that's where the whole Epstein, what is the line with people, and who wants to live in a government that allows, if we're not going to protect our kids, then what good is any of this?
I totally agree. But the question is how to get from here to there. Right.
Well, there's nothing you and I can do about it, but I mean, just to talk about it and say, all right, where is the, because this country, in my opinion, because you got to say that every time, we've lost our moral compass with everything. There's no more moral compass in this country.
It could reappear. I mean, it could reappear, especially if the populace reunites. There was a period where there were the vaxxers and the non-vaxxers. There was the right and the left. And it's conceivable that Joe Sixpacks of the world will finally realize that we are on the same team. And when that happens, then these... Have you ever seen that videotape of the woman at Davos or at WEF? And she says the good news is that the elite, they call themselves the elite, which to me is so narcissistic, it's ridiculous, have never gotten along better. Says the bad news is that the populace doesn't trust us. And I'm going, well, that's because you're fucking assholes. And we're not going to trust you because you're evil. It's not just lack of trust. It's growing to sort of hatred levels. Now, again, I express things like this. I will express situations where I would like to think, for example, if someone was doing something to a family member, like torturing them in prison or, something like that, that I would cap them. But I'm playing into the hands of the elites. That may be what they want.
I asked myself that question too, and that's where again, coming back full circle with the Israel, is this information intentionally being put out there continuously to create more divide, create more anger, combine that with what's happening in cities.
But I don't see how Israel wins this. To me, it keeps coming back to, did they overplay their hand, or is their goal to get us to just throw up our hands and say, I quit? And if it's the latter, then they're not overplaying their hands. They're achieving their goal. But again, we now don't trust pharma. We don't trust vaccines. Is that a win? And if so, who's the winner? And we don't trust now. Increasingly, we're not trusting Israel. All you need, you look at the impact Dave Smith had, right? When he went against Douglas Murray, who I used to be a big fan. I have never seen a guy's career go down the drain as fast as Douglas Murray.
He made no sense. He went out there, like I said earlier. I mean, he kept just bringing up Daryl Cooper. It's like, okay, but Daryl Cooper's not here. So what is the point of attacking?
Well, do you know what his latest book is about? You know what his latest book is about? Israel.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I mean, I thought there was more.
So TikTok, for example. Remember when they're talking about taking over TikTok? And I'm going, what do you mean take over? There was Chinese propaganda. I said, as opposed to ours? Since when do we get to take over some platform because we don't like their propaganda, right? And then they start talking about how they're passing some law that says we won't allow TikTok unless it's American owned, and they're putting together a consortium to buy TikTok. And then you look at the consortium as former Secretary of the Treasury. What's his face with the hot blonde chick? What's his Mnuchin? A bunch of these guys, this consortium of characters to buy TikTok. Right? And I go, what the fuck is going on here? I don't understand this. And then you find out that TikTok is a major hub of pro-Palestinian thought. And you go, holy shit, this is Israel trying to shut down TikTok. I don't like it. And I've been so agnostic. When October 7th
It's funny to hear you talking like this, because it was always we didn't really touch it. We didn't talk like this in previous conversations.
Well, because I've been on silent mode, and then I finally realized, I go, there are people dying in such vast numbers that I don't want to go to my grave knowing that I was agnostic. And for a while, the agnosticism was easy because I read a bunch of books on the Middle East, and none of them stuck. And I wrote about that, and I said, look, it doesn't make any sense. And then I realized no one understands the Middle East. And so I'm not alone, right? And except for Scott Horton.
I just had him on.
Yeah, I watched that one. I appreciated the press. But Scott could also have this elaborate model thing too. You get these really complex models and everything kind of fits, but it doesn't mean it's right. But I do respect Scott's encyclopedic knowledge of that part of the world. But I was able to say, look, I'm never going to understand it. My voice is not important, blah, 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 blah. But I have finally reached a point where I go, I can't sit still anymore. I just don't want to be the guy who said, yeah, I knew they were burning Jews in the ovens, but it said, who am I to speak up, right? One time I defended an accused rapist and stepped forward and testified to a Cornell panel who was investigating the accused rapist on campus. He ended up going to court and he ended up getting convicted. And I think she was a sociopath and I think she was a liar. And I think the kid was innocent. My son had information that showed she was a sociopath. So I said, Thomas, you got to step forward. He didn't want to. And I said, you're going to be laying in bed years from now knowing you could have stepped forward. I'm now trying to save you from that pain. It is time to step forward. So we both stepped forward. They accused me of being gender biased. Now I know because I just signed all sorts of secrecy shit saying I wouldn't talk about it, which now I'm talking about. You know why? Because they released it to the public after I had signed all the secrecy shit. And so everything they wrote about me and everything I said was in public. And I said I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her. And at one point I said, look, I kind of hope that he did it because otherwise this is an unbelievable travesty. That's when they said, oh, gender bias. That's not gender bias. That's my way of saying, look, I'm kind of hoping that we got the right guy because if not, we got the wrong guy. He ended up doing 5 years in prison. I spoke to him in prison. I had lunch with him after he got out of prison. I'll go to my grave now, and I try to help. And so that's why I've stopped. I've removed the gag order on Israel. I try not to speak beyond my skill set. But what infuriates me is to not be able to criticize Israel without being called an anti-Semite. I want to punch people.
I don't think people are doing that anymore, though.
Well, no, they are.
Are they?
It's just that fever is breaking. Mm. And you can thank guys like Dave Smith and Kenneth Owens, right? You can thank the people who went out there when it was really unpopular, and Brett Weinstein and Efferson.
Everett Fennickson. Everett. Her first name is Everett Fennickson.
Right. Who spoke out that week as an Israeli saying that there's no way Israel didn't know they were coming. That took guts.
I wonder what the future of Israel is. Doug Casey's talked about that, like how, it doesn't give a timeline or anything, but the future is very bleak for that country. In its current,
except for they've got a lobby behind them. It's the most powerful lobby in the world.
What do you think 3.5 years from now? Let's play Clue for a second.
Okay.
We've been talking for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, break some record.
I want to beat Chris Irons. Quote the Raven. I know you guys went for 2.5. I had Chris on here. I want to get him back actually.
Yeah.
Interesting guy. He's a big runner too.
Jiu-jitsu too.
Yeah, vegan.
Yeah. Vegan
runner, jiu-jitsu.
Right.
But What do you think 3.5 years from now? What do you think the state of this country will be in? Two-parter. What do you think the state of the country will be in, and what do you think the general public will feel? How they'll feel for Trump and the administration?
Well, it'll depend a lot on economics, right? So if my model of economic rot, that'll make people pretty moody. If AIs knock people out of work, that'll be a huge part. I believe that if Trump is correct and that he's trying to get somewhere and he's doing it in an unorthodox way, but we just can't understand it. So this is the model you reject, and this is the model I cling to. Then it'll take more than 3.5 years. You don't turn an economy like that around. The things he's doing, if they are to get us on the right track, it's a 10-year adventure.
At least.
A 15-year adventure.
At least.
Yeah. But he could be a historical figure that hold on, what?
My oatmeal.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
This is a complicated story here.
Here, we could wrap up. We could wrap up in a minute as soon as you're done.
So I'm not sure we'll know in 3.5 years, although we'll know a lot more than we know now. So if he's tanking, he will tank badly in 3.5 years, right? If the model that he's just fucked up, then he will really look bad in 3.5 years. I think that's plenty of time for him to sink the Titanic. If he's sincerely trying to get it right, I think the compromise model he's trying, but he's getting duped. And that you're forgetting that the dupers are world class, right? There's no way to know who to trust. Then, and I don't hold it against them, warp speed. The people who say, they blame them for warp speed, I think they're nuts. We had a pandemic. He knows no biochemistry. He delegated to Fauci, who looked like the right guy at the time. I didn't know Fauci was a bad guy at the time. And then as this pandemic's playing out, he couldn't fire Fauci. There's no chance he could have fired Fauci. He would have been blamed for every COVID death if he fired Fauci. Everyone. So he delegated to Fauci. I had a Zoom call with Scott Atlas, and he sat next to Fauci and Trump and Birx for 6 months in the Oval Office. And he said Fauci was a moron. Birx was beyond moron. Unimaginably ignorant. But that's what Trump was stuck with. So he gets credit for warp speed for doing fast, although I think the reason is because the vaccine had been invented years earlier. So warp speed was actually just delayed. It was just stalled. But I think it's in the patent literature going pretty far back. So he gets blamed for that, and I don't think that's his fault. The entire first term was Russiagate, which turned out to be a complete fiasco. I would like to see those guys go to prison. If nothing happens to anything that the MAGA guys care about, he'll be in trouble.
We'll have to follow this along and see. That's why curious to get this on recording now as it goes along to where, and I've shared with you where I think this will be, but I only use a hope in this sentence. I hope I'm wrong, and I probably am because I'm wrong more than I'm right with things, with making these predictions. But I think I don't want to say he'll be hated, but I think he'll be strongly disliked by the end of this administration. And I could see him just kind of disappearing.
Well, he'll be 80 something. So another way of looking at it, will Vance be the next president?
So early right now. I mean, if it follows,
but he is more of an heir apparent than usual.
Well, look where he came from, and I'll credit this. I mean, this is how I discovered about JD Vance is through Nick Fuentes' show. Now I don't watch it every night. I don't, for people that are giving me shit. But he,
No. But Vance will carry the Trump legacy.
well, I don't think he'll carry the Trump legacy as much as he will. Where did he come from? Where did he make his money?
No, I totally understand his origin story is very sketchy. But if Trump bombs, Vance is going to have to take a timeout, in my opinion. If Trump succeeds, then Vance will be the candidate and possibly the next president.
Yeah, but if I'm oversimplifying things here, which I'm about to do, if big tech wants Vance to be the next guy, he will be the next guy.
It certainly
because
is possible.
I don't have faith in these election systems any longer. I really didn't, especially after 2020, but especially after 24, because I believe, and I no one can convince me otherwise. They did not allow the other side to cheat.
Well, right. Well, they've been cheating for a long time, too. So there was, Diebold ran the election vote counting years ago, and Diebold, that CEO of Diebold, was a Bush transition person. So the rigging has gone back and forth. WikiLeaks released some information about rigging during the Obama election. I think it was against McCain. And so I think, they've been rigging these elections. But the difference is I think they really did not want Trump in 2020. Or 2016. And what you're saying is it seemed pretty clear that they came to terms with Trump in 2024 and said, okay, we can work with this guy finally. He probably cut a bunch of deals.
I don't even think it's that, though. I don't think it's that. I think that it was easier to do it the way they did. Not the whole notion of
why didn't they do that in 2020 is the question.
I think for whatever reason, it benefited them to have Biden in there. Maybe this ties into all the illegals that have come into the country over 4 years.
I know.
I think was he installed in 16? I don't know. And this is
that
just me.
That seems unlikely to me. I think Hillary looked like the heir apparent then.
So do the people rise up?
Hillary's got a barcode with a price tag tattooed on her ass, right? I mean, she was.
Look at all this big tech, though. I mean, look at all these people that are. I mean, look what's happening right now and where this country is. I mean, it's been going this way for a long time, but it's out in the open now. They're not even hiding it. So they take over MAGA, and it's easier to do it this way. And Vance is a product of that.
Elon getting his mitts on the software is an increasingly disturbing notion that Elon just wanted access to the computers.
I mean, what type of APIs did they put into those agencies based on the work that Elon and Doge was doing?
Right. So the idea of using a bunch of computer junkies to figure out where the money went would seem brilliant, but it's. I don't think Doge is going to show any savings.
They were never going to cut any money. But here's the other thing too. You see the DOD bought a stake in Grok, and what really cracked me up in the beginning of all this that people were championing Elon. Mind you, Elon's entertaining. I mean, I watched him on Rogan smoke a blunt, whatever that was, 7 years ago. But he is tied to government contracts.
Every job.
You cannot become
company.
A billionaire and be free speech and just say whatever you want. I don't care. It doesn't work that way.
He also, ran, a rocket company.
But you're based on government subsidies. I mean, it doesn't work that way where you could just speak your mind.
This is where Fitz comes into it. I think the $35 trillion, which is her most recent quoted number, is keeping all these tech companies afloat. I don't think the earnings of these tech companies would be anywhere near as big as. I think they're getting huge influx of black money into the tech companies. That's where the Mag 7 is getting their money.
Where can people find you, Dave?
Under my desk, actually, out on my deck, out on my porch, looking over the brook. Obviously, it's gotten late because look how dark it's gotten. Or a cloud went overhead. You can find me on Twitter, David B. Collum. You can find me on Tucker at some point. I sent out an email to his booking agent to say, do you have an ETA for this goddamn podcast? And I did not hear. What would be the ultimate insult would be if they never aired it.
Oh, I'm sure
That would mean that I really sucked.
I'm sure they will. It's not one of those things that expires like a Russia Ukraine, or he just had
Well,
that soldier. He
that's
just had
right.
that soldier back on, which I didn't watch the first part, but
By the way, there was something I talked to my brother about him. There was something about him that I found disquieting. Did you watch it?
I did not.
So the guy talks about what's going on in Gaza, and it was everything that you'd want to hear if you would sort of realize that the Israelis were kicking the shit out of the Palestinians. But his whole presentation was thin on facts, heavy on emotion, right? And so he tells this long, protracted story about this 5-year-old kid who he got to know, and then he got killed, and I'm going, we're talking about a country where they're estimating 20% of the people died. And you're telling a story of a 5-year-old and stuff. So the guy's got great credentials. He's got like 12 tours of duty and stuff. But somehow, when I listened to him, it sounded like, remember when the Iraqis were supposedly stabbing babies in incubators, right? It had that feel to it to me, and that turned out to be false. So his name is Aguilar, and there's no reason to doubt him except for the fact that I was picking up on emotion-based arguments, which are always sort of a red flag for propaganda.
Yeah, I need to watch both of those, and then the author for the Oklahoma City bombing. Have you listened to that one yet?
Roberts, I have listened to parts of it. I'm tempted to get the book. I'm tempted to just go for the book. The Oklahoma bombing story has been on my radar as a screwed up story for many years. So that caught my attention.
Did a good interview?
Quickly when I'm not done with it. One of the problems.
Oh, you just froze up on me, Dave. I lost you for a second. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Some stories are too rich in names and places and dates. And the narrative doesn't hold well. There's not a coherent narrative. And so you go, I can't remember, wait a minute, is that guy the good guy or the bad guy? And you find yourself, it's like when the first time I ever read Lord of the Rings. I couldn't keep track of all the players. And so I first read it, and then I read it to my older son, then I read it to my younger son. It was when I read it to my younger son that I finally got the story. And the Oklahoma bombing story's got an awful lot of those, but there's, a lot of guys who committed suicide who shouldn't have, and, a lot of John Does who didn't get arrested and stuff like that. So, and I saw a McVeigh interview, and he made a few cryptic comments that sounded like him saying it's not what you think. It's not what you think. He at one point said he was shocked at how much damage it did, which has been inferred as evidence that he thought he was blowing up a truck in front of the Oklahoma building, the Edward R. Murrow building. He didn't realize he'd be blowing up the entire building.
I was actually at that memorial almost 20 years ago. It's incredible.
Really?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, I remember I was in an airport when it happened, and then I was given a short course at Procter & Gamble when 9/11 happened. So every time I was on the road, something bad happened.
Yeah, I tell people, if you're ever driving through Oklahoma City, stop and see it, because it is incredible to see it. So, Dave,
right. But then the question is why? What was it all about? I can never get the why. It never makes sense to me.
Nothing makes sense anymore.
That's the problem. And I think that might be the plan, right?
Dave, until our next conversation, I'm sure it won't be that long, as long as you're back on the circuit.
Unless we get deplatformed,
right,
or capped.
Right.
Yeah. Adios.
Mic drop.